Mr. Supervisor, you are live.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the August 2nd work session of the East Hampton Town Board. Carol, would you please read the roll call?
Present.
Present.
Here. Present.
Present. Please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Today's meeting will begin with the public portion where any member of the public may address the board on any topic. We ask that you please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. And then we'll be discussing the following topics. The LED street light conversion project with NIPA, that actually will be delayed and we'll get to that as soon as we can, as we have outside consultants that are still traveling, stuck in traffic this morning. We'll have a discussion of the Brooks Park assessment. We have Drew Bennett here, our outside engineer. Carl Fisher draft management plan. Proposed stop signs at Town Line Road intersections. Proposed no parking at Town Line Road. And the Sands Historic District town level designation. And that'll be followed by liaison reports. And we do have a few resolutions today as well. But first, I want to make the public aware of a Suffolk County Water Authority notice. This is an alert that's been sent out from Suffolk County Water Authority that's declaring a stage 1 water emergency. I've never experienced a stage 1 water emergency, but due to the prolonged hot weather and drought, Suffolk County Water Authority is declaring a stage 1 water emergency alert in the town of East Hampton to ensure that there's sufficient water for firefighting and other emergency purposes. Residents must stop all irrigation between the hours of 12 a.m. and 7 a.m. Refrain from all non-essential water usage and reduce shower times and embrace other water-saving measures. Again, this is an alert that's being put out by Suffolk County Water Authority. If you're on public water, please adjust your irrigation system so that they're not watering between the hours of 12 a.m. and 7 a.m. And refrain from any non-essential water usage. And without any further ado, we'll go to public comment. I have 3 speakers signed up, then we'll go to the phones. And if anyone else here wishes to address the board, we'll take you by show of hands. Susan Harder.
Hi, everybody. Guess why I'm here?
Good morning.
Hi. I have a short statement. Hope you'll let me finish. I'm Susan Harder. I'm a lighting designer, the New York representative of the International Dark Sky Association, and a member of the board of directors of the Hamptons Observatory. I received the LED report just yesterday, and I need to point out some of the problems it presents for our town and suggest practical solutions. First, the recommendations from the consultants are not at all dark sky compliant, as listed in their report, for several important reasons. They do not meet best practices, nor the 5 principles for responsible outdoor lighting, a policy which was sent to you as endorsed by all 5 CACs to provide guidance for this project. Those 5 principles were issued by the Illuminating Engineer Society and the International Dark Sky Association, 2 organizations that set standards for outdoor lighting to provide safe, environmentally responsible, and energy-wise outdoor lighting. The consultants are recommending a higher percentage of blue light waves from the LEDs. This is a major problem for night vision, human health, damage to the environment, disruption of habitats for healthy flora and fauna, and are an established cause of macular degeneration. We do not see as well in the presence of blue light waves since our pupils will contract more, and blue light produces more glare and a garish nighttime appearance. 2 letters are coming to you from eye care professionals about the problems of blue light waves. I have documentation and can provide an illustrated presentation for you to prove all of this. So what is the solution? Now that the manufacturers will supply and all now provide proper Kelvin if asked, they supply 2200 Kelvin and even 1800 Kelvin, which is appropriate in residential and historic districts. Why was not 2200 Kelvin used for one of the two samples installed on Atlantic Avenue? And those fixtures, by the way, were not dark sky compliant. Or at least given us a choice in the survey of neither. 2200 Kelvin is the standard for Suffolk County. And if it had been available, Southampton would have used it. Just ask their planner and their dark sky committee members. 2200 Kelvin was voted as preferred by 70% of the residents in a Massachusetts town similar in size to East Hampton, and they were used throughout as a replacement. And 2200 Kelvin is the International Dark Sky Association Board of Directors recommendation. Primarily, you need to have an independent lighting design consultant, independent from energy and manufacturers, to review the streetlights and determine where and when to light the streets, which are needed when you have conflict areas of cars and pedestrians. Cars have headlights, and streetlights may not have been needed everywhere. They were installed decades ago by Lilco to cover the cost of extending electrical service. There is a certified lighting designer here on Long Island who could do this, and I'll give you his VTI. He and I designed the lighting at the spring school. I was told that I would receive the RFP in order to distribute it to qualified lighting design professionals, but it was never sent to me. I've been assured by Councilwoman Rogers that it is not too late to adjust these streetlight recommendations to reflect what is best for our town, the environment, our health, safety, and to protect our view of the stars in the sky. This project would benefit from being assigned to our planning department, as they have the experience, knowledge to review outdoor lighting. So when you know better, you do better. So let's do better. And I have some documents I can give you.
Thank you. Thanks, Susan.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you for coming in. Rona Klotman. Morning, Rona.
Morning, Board. I'm Rona Klotman, and I'm here as Chair of the Amaganset Citizens Advisory Committee to inform you of the dire need for lighting in the historic district of Amaganset. Safety is first on our list, and as there's been issues of inconsistent lighting, dark holes in spots, poor Cobra lighting with various height poles, some creating poor lighting situations and shadows. We've even had a death in front of Astros a few years ago. We have had a subcommittee of which I would like to commend them. We have met since March several times. It's Michael Sinque, Dawn Brophy, Gail Jordan, David Hillman, Jim McMillan, John Broderick, who's our chair, and myself. We have met and walked the streets of Amaganset to make suggestions to our town through our liaison, the supervisor. But I'm back today to reiterate our lighting needs to the board in case you don't have a full picture of what the subcommittee found. We walked the Amaganset Main Street business area as a start. We found there was a patchwork of lit areas that plummeted into darkness within yards of one another, and several streetlights were either half working or out completely. Bulbs in some cases were yellow, other cases very bluey white. Some of the poles were so tall that the light never reached the ground. Some were obstructed by trees, and this was March when the leaves were not fully out. Bright light to dark ratio was extreme. Amaganset Main Street is in need of a full rehab in terms of lighting. This poor lighting creates an unsafe condition for both pedestrians and drivers. The committee members felt when crossing the street, it was difficult to know if drivers of cars were even able to see us. The street in front of the talkhouse is quite dark, and the number of pedestrians that converge on the area in this warm weather, and those who are customers of the square who dine in our restaurants and venture across the street, are in total danger of being hit by a car. In summer, these number in the hundreds on a summer night. Amaganset Main Street needs attractive fixtures that provide proper illumination and respect the 5 principles for responsible outdoor lighting that ACAC has passed unanimously. These principles are supported by the Illuminating Engineering Society, of which your presenters today are members. Attractive fixtures are not ones we can buy at Home Depot. I'm hoping this group and the town board can be somewhat creative in choosing fixtures that look like they belong in the historic district. We feel it's very important to keep the old town feeling of Amaganset Main Street. We want to follow the influence of the Amaganset Village Improvement Society's way of striving to enhance the beauty of our hamlet. We want the placement of fixtures on both the north side and south side to alternate so that it doesn't look like an airport runway. There are good existing fixtures in both the square and the East Hampton Village, so I'm not sure why we're looking at Southampton lighting. The curves of the sidewalk in Amaganset are currently very difficult to see, and there are no lights on the street in front of the library, and patrons have fallen in the darker months. We understand from Kim Shaw we will be dealing with lighting from Indian Wells, which is the mobile station, to the firehouse. This should include the area in front of the library. It's the entrance to our parking lot, and it has absolutely no lighting. Amaganset residents pay a line item in our tax bill called the Amaganset Light District, and we aren't even sure what that amounts to. Who is in charge of spending it? How much yearly comes in? How much of that can be used to make this lighting project reflect what the residents want in our hamlet? Just to let the board know, we do have other lighting concerns. That includes Brent's to Indian Wells and the mobile station, and past the firehouse to the IGA and senior housing street lighting. And most important, our Amaganset parking lot. If this was repaved a few years ago, solar lighting was added to an additional space in the back, and no proper lighting was ever done to the lot. We hope that this group you are hiring are able to listen to what is needed in this Amaganset hamlet, rather than just replacing what they want into your capable hands. We trust you, the town board, to do what's right for Amaganset. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Courtney Garnell.
Hello, everyone.
Courtney.
I am here representing the Surfrider Foundation, the Eastern Long Island chapter. We are initiating a new campaign called Skip the Stuff. I wrote a letter to the editor in the Star a couple months ago. We just went through Plastic Free July. Skip the Stuff is a program that is for restaurants to only provide plastic single-use utensils and wrappers upon request. It's a very simple way to reduce single-use plastic. It saves money for restaurants. It's a bill currently in the City Council in New York City, and it looks very favorable to pass. So I think if it can happen in New York City, it can happen here. And we would just like to make the community aware of that and the board aware of our new campaign. And we'd like to work with you going forward in terms of similar to, the bag ban or the styrofoam ban or the straws. It's kind of similar along that. And it's really a simple way to change behavior and hopefully slowly reduce our plastic imprint. And one of the other things too is that the proof is in the numbers, and of our beach cleanups from 2019 till 2021, 9 out of the 10 items that we pick up on the beach are food related. So, and in the beach cleanups that we've done, we just did one this past weekend at Main Beach. It's all utensils, and people need to learn to, and restaurants don't just have to throw that into the bag de facto. A lot of people get to go and take it home where they have utensils. And I understand we are in a beach resort community and a lot of people buy food at the beach. But if we could get them to bring their own utensils to the beach, there would be less ending up in the ocean. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Courtney. Appreciate you. Anyone else wish to address the board on any matter? Yes, Michael.
Good morning, board, and thanks for your time today. I'm here representing myself, a 40-year merchant on Main Street, and I've also I am on the ACAC board, and we've had many meetings walking down Main Street with lighting and all. But I am all in favor of brightening up Main Street a bit. It's really dark. As a matter of fact, Rona, as you said, the entrance into the parking lot is extremely dark. We close the shop at 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and it's almost scary sometimes walking through there. So anything we could do to make it better would be great, and anything I could do to help, you guys know me, let me know. I'd be happy to get behind it, and I know that sitting in the ACAC meetings, they're all in favor of pushing it together too. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it. Anyone else wish to address the board? Yes, Janet?
Good morning, everybody. It's nice to see you all.
See you too.
I am Janet Jennings, and I'm a member of the Brooks Park Arts and Nature Center Committee. And I received a copy of Drew Bennett's report yesterday morning, and I'd like to address the portion of the report that deals with the Brooks Studio. The report recommends that the Brooks Studio be demolished, which effectively disqualifies it from benefiting from CPF funds. The architect-designed studio is the jewel of this property. It is the center of the compound and illustrates how Brooks and Park designed an environment conducive to a creative lifestyle, which is kind of one of the main premises of our whole center here. While our committee is grateful that the town board approved the creation of the Bennett report, I am suggesting that the town retain a second firm that specializes in historic building assessment, concentrating specifically on the Brooks Studio. A second opinion would provide a balanced conclusion and help remove any doubt about how to proceed. A historic preservation specialist would determine if any materials are reusable and salvageable in order to help qualify for CPF funds. According to 9A of the CPF rules and regulations that I am now very familiar with, permissible CPF stewardship costs do include architectural and planning consultants and reports. In October of 2021, Mike Devonshire from Jan Hurd Corney Associates provided a field observation report of the Brooks Studio that came to a different conclusion than the Bennett report. Mr. Devonshire, a world-renowned historic preservationist, concluded that the studio exhibits the most serious levels of deterioration, but the condition is reversible and other areas are in restorable condition as well. Our committee would like to see Mr. Mike Devonshire complete his report, and that's what I'm requesting today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Janet. And congratulations to Ben on winning Best Short Film in the Surf and Turf Division of the Montauk Film Festival. Anyone else wish to address board? Marietta, and then Mike will get back to you.
Honorable Supervisor Van Scoyoc and board members. Also, as a member of the Brooks Park Art and Nature Center Committee, I stand in support of the preservation of the Brooks Park site. I thank the supervisor and board members for their service and continued engagement with the Brooks Park site. I'd like to touch on a few points as quickly as I can today. Firstly, along with the many community advocates who many years ago first championed the importance of this site, to our current advocates, and I'm pleasantly surprised to see John Mullen here today, who was one of the initial champions of this very special site. Our voices were recently amplified by prestigious institutions specializing in preservation. In 2021, Preservation Long Island named the Brooks Park site to its Endangered Historic Places program. More recently, the National Trust for Historic Places named Brooks Park to its 11 most endangered places. Across the nation, many applications were sent to earn this designation, and Brooks Park was one of the 11. This clearly underscores and elevates the importance of this site as recognized by a prestigious national institution dedicated to historical preservation. We now have the national spotlight on our path forward with Brooks Park. Shortly after the 11 most designation, Brooks Park was also named, amazingly, to the Preservation League of New York State's 7 to Save. I've been told many of you sites, if any, have been simultaneously listed on all regional, state, and national endangered lists. I might add that these esteemed institutions feel that not one, not two, not three, but all 4 structures on the Brooks Park site are an important part of this preservation proclamation. And that brings me to my second point. The public was just presented yesterday with the Restoration and Rehab Design Development Memo from Drew Bennett. And I understand he'll be presenting his findings later today. Most concerning in the findings, just having briefly read it, is an option to demolish, as Janet poignantly pointed out, the Brooks Studio. But that's really not an option for the community. The other option refers to the Brooks Studio on page 5 as reconstruction. The Bennett report refers to the Secretary of the Interior standards data from 1983. I thought it would be important to learn what reconstruction means, so I referred to a more updated version of the SIS. It refers to treatment standards, preservation, rehabilitation, restoration, and reconstruction. And from this standards, I quote, "Reconstruction is defined as the act or process of depicting by means of new construction the form, features, and detailing of a non-surviving site, landscape, building, structure, or object for the purpose of replicating its appearance at a specific period of time and in its historic location. The reconstruction standards establish a limited framework for recreating a vanished or non-surviving building with new materials primarily for interpretive purposes. Reconstruction has the most limited application because so few resources that are no longer extant can be documented to the degree necessary to accurately recreate the property in a manner that conveys its appearance at a particular point in history." So perhaps reconstruction is not applicable for the Brooks Studio, and qualified preservation experts hopefully will weigh in on that. And then perhaps there might be some permissible CPF funds that would be permissible for the restoration of the Brooks Studio. As Janet mentioned, we had a leading preservationist firm in the nation conduct a site visit October 2021. One of the quotes that, I see I'm running out of time, stood out was the buildings, I quote, "are all eminently restorable with a generous amount of evocative authenticity to be preserved. Many months have passed since the site visit, and despite the urging from advocates, Preservation Long Island, the National Trust of Historic Places, and others to fully stabilize and secure tarp all 4 structures, sadly to this day, the Brooks Studio is still not completely tarped. I request that perhaps the board pass a resolution to properly secure these buildings. And to wrap up, with the normal passage of time, us community advocates might eventually age out, move on. Board members will come and go. But the one constant in this equation is the legacy left to us in East Hampton Springs. The historic significance of this site will remain as a constant, hopefully, for future generations to learn from and be proud of. Thank you for your time. And just quickly, because again, we were just presented with this document yesterday, given this short notice, we're just starting to receive early analysis from preservation specialists, quoting that perhaps the Brooks Studio does not need to be demolished. The ACM, meaning the asbestos containing material, can be encapsulated, but it'll depend on what the ultimate scope of the work is. And there are other comments coming in, and I do know Preservation League in New York State, National Trust all want to weigh in, but due to the short notice, either people are on vacation or just getting back. So hopefully they will also share their thoughts. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Marietta.
Can you please state your name for the record?
Marietta Gavaris.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to address the board? Michael, you want to have another shot?
Thank you. I wanted to thank all of our neighbors and friends who came to our life-saving station lobster bake. It was nice to see everybody out again. It was a great evening at the station. We also have our lobsters to go, where you can purchase tickets and take a lobster bake home. Thanks to Boswick's, it's $100. The tickets are available online or through at the Amaganset wine store. Also, things that are happening this weekend in Amaganset is the Amaganset Village Improvement Society Summer Splash. It's our 100th anniversary of the Amaganset Village Improvement Society. So it's going to be a big night at Southwark Country Club on Saturday, this Saturday the 6th. And tickets available again at the Amaganset wine store or at avis.org. But it's really another wonderful community event. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Anyone else in the audience wish to? Yes, John.
Forgive me for a little more Brooks Park, but wanted to give you some historic perspective on that.
Just state your name for the record.
John Mullen, Mullen, 27 years on Louse Point Road. I came on that property in 2013, not long after the town had purchased it. It's 11 spectacular acres with the historic structures of James Brooks and Charlotte Park. As you know, I'm sure you've heard way too much about it for many, many years now. But when I learned about James Brooks and Charlotte Park and looked at particularly the Brooks Studio, I realized, oh my goodness, this is has great potential for reinforcing the art focus of East Hampton and Springs especially. And I engaged Richard Baxter, whom I think you're familiar with as for many, many, many years and many, many projects, the best restoration and preservation builder contractor in the area. As a matter of fact, one of his other little projects is photographed behind you and the building that you're in. Richard came out and we, I'm, as I said, retired architect, did an analysis of the building, and I engaged him, and he did very significant structural reinforcement of the building to ensure its ongoing structural integrity. And we tarped the roofs, and we changed the locks on all of the buildings. And then shortly thereafter, this board, this council, declared the site a historic site. Thank you for that. And then we formed a group, and we raised some money. We raised $40,000, and I matched it, so we had $80,000 that was going to preserve and celebrate that site. And now I see, excuse me, I'm 80 years old, and I'm backing out. And now, fortunately, as you've seen, a group of very capable and enthusiastic women have come forward and are making good progress on that. And I think we all find that often when the women step forward, we get more things done. Looking at your council, I see a majority of females.
That's right.
Thank you for that. But I now see that it is badly, badly deteriorated, that the town has not overseen the protection of that site. Please, please bring this to Springs. Springs is not just a place where the workers live. Springs is a place that is the center of mid-century modern abstract art, and Brooks and Park were a major part of that. Best friends of Mr. Pollock and Ms. Krasner. Sorry for my yada yada. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John. Anyone else? Chase, Mike, I guess Matt on the line, right, Matt?
Yep, we got plenty of callers here.
Okay, let's go to the phones. Thank you.
All right. Caller 2296, you are on the air. Caller 2296, you are on the air.
Hey, hold on. Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, please state your name for the
Hello?
record.
Oh, yes, hi, it's Christina Bradley, and I'm just calling in today because I've lived at 61 Lincoln Avenue for almost 5 years, and I support Alex Rodriguez's request for a public hearing. Thank you.
I'm sorry, public hearing on what topic?
The Crandall, Norfolk Woods. I don't think he spoke yet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Be well, Gina. Thanks for calling. Matt, if you go to the next caller, please.
Caller 9378, you are on the air. Caller 9378.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Please state your name for the record.
Oh, great, okay. Yes, hi, my name is Katie Como, Comeau, and I'm the Vice President for Policy and Preservation at the Preservation League of New York State. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. The League is the statewide nonprofit preservation organization for New York State. And I really just want to add the League's support to the points already made by Janet, Marietta, and John in support of Brooks Park. So I'm not going to reiterate what they said, but do want to note that both the October 2021 and February 2022 evaluations of the buildings were limited in scope. That's a typical first step in evaluating historic buildings, but it's not the type of thorough condition report that's normally used when making decisions about buildings of this level of significance. Before any decisions are made as to the future of the buildings, they should be subject to a complete independent evaluation of conditions, particularly since the two cursory examinations done so far came to such dramatically different conclusions. And a full independent report by architects and engineers experienced with the evaluation and repair of historic buildings would provide a framework for making decisions based on solid evidence. So we would strongly encourage the town to facilitate such a report and would be happy to help with that if we can. We also note that there's no consideration or cost estimate in the July report related to appropriate stabilization and mothballing of the buildings. This is a common solution when buildings are in deteriorated condition, but there are still issues to be resolved or funds to be raised before rehabilitation or restoration can proceed. Thank you for the opportunity to address your group today. We see the site as having tremendous potential, and we look forward to helping to find a positive solution. Thank you.
Thank you for calling, Katie. Matt, if you'd go to the next caller, please.
Caller 1131, you are on air.
Yes, hi, my name is Lisa Regalia, and I live at 55 Lincoln Avenue, just across from the Norfolk Woodlands. And Alex has not spoken yet, but I support his request for a public hearing to make the Crandall Norfolk Woodlands a nature preserve. So thank you for.
Thank you for calling, Lisa. Matt, if you go to the next caller, please.
Caller 7518, you are on the air.
Hi, this is Scott Bluedorn, and I'm calling to lend my additional support for the Brooks Park restoration. Again, I'm not going to reiterate what Janet, Marietta, and John have all said, but I'd like to just say that I think that this project is of utmost importance for a cultural legacy of Springs and for the entire town of East Hampton at large. I think we have a very compelling vision to create a really unique place in Springs that celebrates not only art but nature and how the two are coexistent with each other in this very special place that we all like to call home. I think that the initial report of Drew Bennett it has certainly leaves something to be desired in terms of what can be done with the property, and I think that the town needs to really make its decision to go forth and commit the money necessary to shore this structure up in the best way possible, and I think we really have a unique opportunity to do it, and the time is running out. So I'd also like to agree with Susan Harder's comments on exploring the possibility for the proper lighting, and she really knows what she's talking about, and I think this is really important going forward for a legacy project. This lighting is extremely important. In fact, one thing that I'm not sure was touched on, but there's a connection even between blue light spectrum and the loss of insect diversity. I think that's another really important aspect that needs to be taken into consideration. That being said, I think that there's an opportunity for looking at how lighting can be effective in certain areas, as Rona Klotman had stated earlier. Perhaps, downtown, quote unquote, downtown Amaganset could use some light, and that probably is a very suitable aspect of using a different light in that area. But I think in general, we shouldn't try to find one blanket solution for the entire town. I think that we can be very selective and intelligent in the decisions that we're making going forward, because we're at such a critical juncture in our in really what the infrastructure that we're implementing now is going to carry forward. So I think these are really important projects, and I really urge the town board to do its utmost due diligence in finding the best possible solution for the best outcomes. Thank you very much.
Thanks for calling, Scott.
Caller 4221, you are on the air.
Thank you, Matt. This is Jane Meering in Amaganset. Good morning, board. Good morning, everyone. Last week, I came before you, and I actually started talking a bit about beach access from the perspective of special events permits, but I'd like to continue on the theme in a slightly different way today. The Truck Beach debacle, sorry to use that word, and the Dolphin Drive kerfuffle has made me, and I imagine many others, reflect more deeply about beach access, as well as the scale of the development that continues along our shorelines. And I think there is a lot we can and should do tactically and strategically around beach access. So today I just want to float 3 points. With respect to the tactical, I know East Hampton is blessed with wonderful public access, gorgeous array of bay, harbor, and sound beaches, but it appears to me that the town is now actually meaningfully under-resourced with respect to public resident parking for beach pedestrian access on the ocean side, and that's especially with respect to lifeguarded beaches. So first, I'd like to ask if the board would initiate a project to establish a brand new lifeguarded, comfort-stationed, town resident, quote, bathing beach out on the Napeague stretch of the scale, perhaps like an Indian Wells. And I believe we own the land to do this. The 6.7-acre parcel that runs from 27 down to the ocean beach, owned by the town, known colorfully as the, quote, Assembly of God parcel. According to the South Florida Preserve document I read, in the past, it has been deemed the best place to site a new beach if needed. And I guess I'd like to make the case that it's no longer a question of if. My second sort of tactical request, I asked the town would renew efforts to establish additional road end or pocket parking areas for resident public access where there is none, and especially along the Napeague stretch, out through Hither Hills along Old Montauk Highway. It's my observation that in the 9 or 10 miles between Atlantic Avenue Beach and Kirk Park Beach, there are fewer than 50 parking spots for resident public beach access. As examples for these type of sort of pocket or road end, I'd like to suggest first the use of the 2 lots the town owns on the east side of Lobster Roll, contiguous to the South Florida preserve for a small amount of parking with pedestrian access to the beach. I'd like to ask the town if it can establish a road end parking at the cul-de-sac of the Beach Plum Court subdivision, where I believe you already own one of the 9 parcels in the subdivision. I'd also ask you to look at the Dunes Lane, not Dune Lane, but Dunes Lane, which is a 6-lot subdivision just west of Marlin Drive, to create some road end parking. And also finally at the end of Beaverhead Street for some parking, pedestrian, and even drive-on access. My third point is a bit more strategic than tactical. The scope and scale and concentration of structures being permitted by the town all along our shorelines over the last decade, ocean, bay, sound, harbor, lake and ponds, is pretty staggering, not only from an environmental, natural resources, water quality, and sustainability perspective, but also how it constricts public access. So I'm here today to say I feel like we need a major rethink and reset about our town zoning code and permitting protocols, not just for oceanfront, but for all waterfront development. I think it's time to address head-on the size and intensity of what is built along and within proximity to our shorelines. Beach access is not just about setting foot or wheels in the sand, it's also about visual access. I note that Surfrider was represented at the meeting today on a different topic, and they've written a lot about this. One of the defining elements of East Hampton town character is an ongoing sense of being near the water, being a rural seaside community, and maintaining shore and water sightlines and view sheds are a core part of access and core to our sense of place. So that's that on that. I just want to take 10 seconds to also state my enthusiasm and respect for the Brooks Park studio building itself. It's stunning, evocative, and a very important defining East Hampton modernist history representation. And then lastly, I'm so excited to hear the board address the Sands neighborhood today and potential historic designation. That's just such a crucial, important part of our history and represents, you know, authenticity and community character in East Hampton. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Matt, do we have any other callers online?
Yes, caller 8. Oh, sorry. Caller 4664, you are on air.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, good morning. Please state your name for the record.
Hi, good morning. This is Sarah Kautz. I'm the Director of Historic Preservation at Preservation Long Island. We are a nonprofit organization headquartered in Cold Spring Harbor and founded in 1948 with a mission to advocate for historic preservation across Long Island. As part of our mission-based work, Brooks Park was listed as one of our endangered historic places in 2021. We thank the board and the local community for your continuing efforts to preserve this internationally significant historic place. And we would like to add some further preliminary comments concerning the recently released assessment materials. We are encouraged to see the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties cited on page 2 of the assessment. However, the assessment cites the 1983 version of the standards, which is now substantially outdated. The Park Service most recently revised and updated the standards in 2017, and this is available online at the National Park Service's website. We agree that the standards for rehabilitation offer a great approach to guide repairs at Brooks Park. Unfortunately, the proposed scope of work includes actions inconsistent with the standards, such as demolishing Brooks Studio and removing certain features and materials without adequate documentation of severe deterioration or clear specifications for their replacement. And I just want to note, according to the standards, quote, deteriorated historic features will be repaired rather than replaced. Where the severity of deterioration requires replacement of a distinctive feature, the new feature will match the old in design, color, texture, and where possible, materials. Replacement of missing features will be substantiated by documentary and physical evidence, end quote. More details are needed to explain how repairs and replacement work will be conducted, including specific techniques, procedures, and methods for the treatment of individual features and materials. As Marietta already mentioned, The assessment appears to use the term reconstruction in a manner that is inconsistent with the definition by the standards for reconstruction. Since all structures at Brooks Park still survive, reconstruction is not appropriate for this site. The proposed reconstruction activities would more accurately be described as rehabilitation via the replacement of severely deteriorated surviving features and materials. The assessment suggests that energy efficiency is not compatible with historic preservation. To the contrary, there are many, many great examples of successful projects from across the country that prove energy efficiency is wholly compatible with historic preservation. For more information about this important topic, we recommend the Secretary of the Interior's illustrated guidelines on sustainability for rehabilitating historic buildings, which are part of the standards for rehabilitation, and these are also available on the National Park Service website. It seems that CPF tax revenue could potentially fund more work than is indicated by the assessment, which only addresses the uses of CPF monies for historic preservation purposes. However, Brooks Park is jointly designated for the purposes of historic preservation and open space. It appears that some of the expenses considered ineligible for CPF funding under historic preservation for the grounds more generally may be eligible under open space, such as enhancing public access to the site by updating the parking lot and driveway to meet fire safety needs. We recommend reassessing the eligible CPF expenses inclusive of the property's joint designation for both historic preservation and open space. Relatedly, some of the proposed expenses, such as demolition of Brooks Studio, appear to be inappropriately budgeted to the CPF fund, which cannot be used to destroy a historic structure. We also agree with Janet's suggestion to hire a historic preservation consultant such as Mike Devonshire to provide more expertise on historic preservation planning for this important site. And we would be pleased to speak with you at your earliest convenience about any of these comments, and looking forward to seeing Mr. Bennett's presentation. I also want to mention that Preservation Long Island enthusiastically supports the designation of sands, which we'll also be hearing about today. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Sarah. Be well. Matt, do we have any other callers?
You too.
Yes, we still got callers. Caller 1936, you are on the air.
Hi, this is Alex Rodriguez. Can you hear me?
Yes, Alex. Good morning.
Thank you. Honorable board, very well. Supervisor Van. So I'm here to speak on behalf of my neighbors, who I think already have expressed some support for the public hearing for the designation of the Crandall Norfolk Woodlands as nature preserve. As you know, something that's pretty important. Thank you. I kind of want to start this brief talk by thanking the other people who spoke today. Obviously, there's a lot of support for preservation of the things that make our place special here in the Hamptons. Whether it's surf riders, environmental protection by picking up waste and preventing the disposal of more waste at Brooks Park. Marietta and John, thank you for your yada yada. It's very important to talk about this in the face of mega development and activity that increasingly threatens the quality of life, even the livability of the Hamptons. All these things are really important. Reducing the amount of light that's put into the night sky so we can actually see the stars. Preservation efforts in the past, like the Pollock Studio, actually the town hall where you're seated now, iconic windmills that are here. Those things make this place special and they keep it special. And part of that same conversation is the patches of forest that remain, one of which is the Crandall Norfolk Woodlands. They add to the magic of the town and they deserve protection as well. So we support, I'll speak for myself. I personally support the Brooks project. I think it actually, in the scope of things, takes very little to protect what is irreplaceable and invaluable cultural treasure. And the same is true of the forest. Preservationists are really a rare breed. In retrospect, never wrong. You can always demolish things later, but you cannot make new old friends. And these structures, these natural spaces are our old friends. And once they're gone, they're really gone for good. It's hard to put it back, if you can at all. So I want to ask the board pointedly, and I'll ask again at the end, when is the public hearing on our nomination now that the Nature Preserve Committee has voted in our favor? I know that David Leiss told me in a meeting in January that, sorry?
The last name is Lease, not Leiss.
Oh, okay. I apologize. David Lease told us in a meeting in January they send nominations to the Nature Preserve Committee. Is that right, David?
Correct.
Okay. But it took much more than the statutorily designated time frame of 1 month. I think it's 45 days or 1 month. It took a few months, and it therefore is not in compliance with the law. But now that it was sent to the Nature Preserve Committee for recommendation, the Nature Preserve Committee actually recommended designation. So it would, I would be stymied. I'd be puzzled if the town board now went ahead and ignored the Nature Preserve Committee's specific recommendation that the place be designated nature preserve. I do want to mention for the record that our group, my neighbors, fully understand the distinction between the nature preserve and a managed park and recreation area, one such as Buckskill Meadow Park. The neighborhood, our neighborhood, does not need or want basketball courts. We do not need or want tennis courts. We do not want running or walking tracks or anything to that effect. We want the place to be nature preserved. And there are nature preserve examples in the immediate vicinity. I know that there's been some chatter about things like ATV riding and paintballing in those places. I have been here for the past 5 years, have not seen, 6 years, I have not seen any paintball evidence, activity. I walk through those woods regularly. I've never seen an ATV go through. There are no ATV tracks. What there are is perhaps children's bicycle tracks, things to that effect. And there has been a lot of litter that I and the neighbors carried out of this town-owned land, thousands of pounds of waste. As a community, we got together and removed those a few months ago. And that was off of town-owned land, so the town seems not to care about it as far as we can tell. We do ask that you do not disregard the will of the community that's here now, and not disregard the will of not disregard the will of the community in favor of what a hypothetical community may actually want in the future. We're here now, and again, preservationists are a rare breed. They're really never wrong in retrospect. You can always break things. You can always think about it and put it back later. Destroy it later.
Alex, we appreciate your comments. Did you have any other points you wanted to make?
I do. Thank you. The community widely agrees that the woodlands should be added to the town's nature preserve.
I'm sorry, Alex, that's not a new point. Do you have any points that you haven't mentioned yet? We have a rather full agenda and a lot of people waiting to speak.
Yeah, I'll say one more thing. Instead of offering lip service to preservation in the form of a no dumping sign, which to me suggests that the place is considered a dump by the town, or appears to be a dump by some, the town owes itself and the people of East Hampton actual protection in the form of nature preserve designation, which preserves what is truly special about East Hampton, the natural environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
All right.
Matt, do you have any other callers on the line?
Yeah, we still have about 6 or 7 here. 2866, you are on the air. Caller 2866, you are on the air.
Thank you. Good morning, Town Board, or good afternoon now. This is Jacqueline Esposito. I'm a Lincoln Avenue resident. I'm also calling to support Alex Rodriguez's request for a public hearing now that the Nature Preserve Committee has voted in favor of including the Crandall Norfolk Woodlands and the town's nature preserve under the town code. I know you all have a written nomination from the community, but just to recap, it's very clear that under the town code, the woodlands meet the legal criteria for inclusion on in the nature preserve. Many community members who raise their kids in the woods, many who've lived here much longer than some of you on the town board and much longer than I have been very clear that they would like the woods preserved, and they believe that they are pristine and good enough for the nature preserve. We understand that there are some town officials who claim that the woodlands are not good enough for the nature preserve. We disagree. The community is ready and willing to partner with members, town officials, to do any restoration of the woodlands that's necessary, and to maintain them. As you heard from Alex, and as the East Hampton Star reported, our community, dozens of community members came out in April on Earth Day. We carried out a ton, we had it measured at the dump, a ton of garbage. It brought our community together. It was a beautiful event, but it also is a stain on our town. We have to preserve our open space. We heard from many people today about the importance of preservation, preserving our night skies, preserving our historic structures, and preserving our land. That is what you were all elected to do. We hope that you will work with us to do just that. We are asking for a public hearing. I would like each of you to let us know if you do support holding a public hearing and when that would be. Thank you so much.
Thank you for calling, Jackie. Matt, any other callers?
Yeah, apologies. One of the next caller was, they seem to have hopped off, so we're going to go to caller 0789. You are on the air. Caller 0789. You are on the air.
Hello? Oh, my goodness. I'm sorry. Hello?
Hello, we can
Hello?
hear you. Hello, we can hear you.
Oh, great. Hi, Peter and company. It's Margaret Garcetti. I hope all is well in your summer. You know, you're all having a lovely summer. I just wanted to call in to obviously share my hopes that you will consider the Norfolk, Crandall, Woodlands for the Nature Committee preserves. You know, it's not to be redundant, but firstly, I want to say that there's a lot of conversation. Just recently, there's been a conversation about paintball and ATVing or whatever it is. I've been living on Crandall Street for, I guess, 28 years, and the whole paintball, that was a very short-lived craze about 26 years ago until, then I guess parents and families thought it was unsafe. So it was just a very, very short time where children were doing that in that particular land. That hasn't I haven't seen anything like that in over 25 years. And so, to hold on to that, I'm hoping that's not where the town board is going. Also, just another point that I just wanted to share with you is, we're a community. I think at this point, a lot of our names and you've seen us, and obviously we're grassroots. We've come together. We have, very strong feelings about this piece of land, this parcel. And I don't think we need to convince you how passionate we are about it. You're all aware of it. And so out of respect for all of you, I'm just going to share again, that this is the neighborhood, this is what we're hoping for now. And to also fill out reports and have conversation about fictional neighbors that may move in down the road 20 years from now is really unfair to the taxpayers and the people who love and are living in this community now. We're asking that you give us a consideration. We are the workers, as I always say. We are the locals, and so it would be, to me, it would be, and to all of us, an amazing gesture and an amazing point that you're recognizing that in our area there is a nature preserve that we can appreciate the middle class local families, and that would mean so much to everyone, all of the people in Springs and surrounding areas. So I just hope you give us every consideration. We're put on for a vote. We were so happy that the Nature Preserve Committee agreed and nominated, and we're hoping you guys do too. And that's all I wanted to say for today. So wish you all well, and I'll be in touch.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. Appreciate your comments. Thanks for calling in. Matt, do we have more callers?
Yeah, 5 callers here online. We got caller 3314. You are on the air. Caller 3314. Looks like they dropped last second, so we're going to go to caller 1337. You are on the air, caller 1337.
Hello. Can you? Am I being heard?
Good afternoon.
Oh, hi. Thank you, Peter. Hi. This is Erwin Levy. I'm a 33-year resident of Springs. I've had the privilege of meeting everyone on the town board, including you just this past week. I also serve on the Nature Preserve Committee and the Spring Citizen Advisory Committee, so I work closely with both David and Kate, who are a pleasure to work with. Just want to put that out there. Couple of things I'll touch on. Very excited about the SANS designation. I've been researching this community for a long time, and I think it's wonderful that this conversation is going to happen. It's very worthy of every historic accolade and designation that it can be given. I'll also touch on, as a private citizen, the Crandall, Norfolk, Woodlands for a minute. I live in Springs, about a mile south of this area, and I am all for this being a nature preserve. One thing that it hasn't really been mentioned, although I know you're all aware of it, the Crandall, Norfolk, Woodlands abuts a commercial zone, a very busy commercial zone along Fort Pond Boulevard, with a car dealership that's busy early in the morning till late in the day. There's a bar and a tavern and a coffee shop. There's a lot of activity over there. This parcel of land apparently is the sanctuary for these people. I think that's why the Nature Preserve Committee voted the way it did. I emphatically, as a member of that committee, did support that, and I support that as a private resident as well. But lastly, I'm also a member of the Brooks Park Property Arts and Nature Committee. I'm not going to go into everything that's already been said. I wrote a letter to the East Hampton Star about this, but again, a lot of these points have already been touched by my other committee members. I just want to add briefly, we know this is a challenge. This is a heavy lift to do this, but it was also a heavy lift with Duck Creek Farms. It was a heavy lift with Mulford Farm. It's a heavy lift with Hook Green. It was a heavy lift with the Gardner Homestead. It was a heavy lift with the Moran House. We wouldn't want to live in a community that didn't have the beauty and the sense of place that these living histories provide. And I'll make the final point. The abstract expressionist movement, that community is every bit as important as the fishing community, the farmers, the baymen, the Bonnickers, and everyone else that's made the fabric of this place what it is. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for calling, Erwin.
Okay, caller 3314. You are on air, caller 3314. Caller 4389, you are on the air as the previous caller dropped. 4389.
Hi. Hello. Hi. Yes, this is Michaela Gomez. And I'm just calling about the Crandall, Norfolk, Woodlands to please, I'm happy that the Preservation Committee designated or approved it, and I would love to have a public hearing on that, and also please vote in favor of the conservation and preservation of that area. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks for calling, Michaela.
Bye.
Caller 8046, you are on the air. Caller 8046.
Good morning, and thank you, Peter. My name is Lisa Steiner. I lived at 61 Broadway for 12 years, and I'm calling to say that I support everything that my community has said today. I'm not going to repeat everything, but we need to be heard because our neighborhood is extremely committed to make this happen. You've seen how we work in the past, and we are going to make it happen. And we are organized and passionate. As you know, we carted out a ton of garbage. Where else would that happen? It didn't happen on Green Hollow Road. And I thank you for your time, and I hope to be seeing you at a hearing or at a meeting, and we can talk and do this as a community. Thank you for your time. We're ready to fight the fight if we have to, and you know we are committed. Thank you.
Thanks for calling, Lisa.
This is the last new caller, Mr. Supervisor, 6326. You're on the air, 6326.
Yes, hi. My name is Cheryl Biscardi. I've lived at 24 Fort Pond Boulevard for 24 years, and I support Alex Rodriguez's request for a public hearing. Thank you.
Thanks for calling, Cheryl. Appreciate your comments. And that concludes public comment. We'll get on with our work session agenda. Do we have all the folks that we need for the first topic? Okay, so the first discussion is the LED street lighting conversion project. And I think we have some representatives from the New York Power Authority as well. This project initiated as part of the town's resiliency and sustainability efforts, where we wanted to upgrade lighting throughout the town, street lights to LED lighting to both save electricity and improve lighting as we went. I will just briefly state that there are a couple of things going on here. One was the overall town project, and in that process, as the liaison to the Amaganset CAC, we had numerous discussions about an opportunity to upgrade the lighting in the historic district, specifically installing historic style lighting. That would be, I think, a separate project, but it's an opportunity for us to take a look at that and perhaps design improvements there to address those specific requests and needs of the community. Without any further ado, Kim Shaw, our Natural Resources Director, will kick this off. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you, Peter. I think you stole my notes.
I'm sorry.
Okay. So I just want to recap that we are working with NYPA to install smart street lighting. This is empowering communities to make energy efficient investments. By converting existing streetlights to energy efficient LED, municipalities are able to save taxpayer dollars, provide better lighting to their community, and reduce energy use and reduce impacts on the environment. Without further ado, I'd just like to introduce the team. Bo Reed is going to lead the discussion. Christine Hartman is here. And
Good afternoon, Bo. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having us here today. Is the presentation able to be streamed? We do have a presentation prepared. I'll hit all the points on that, and then obviously it will be shared once that is capable of doing so.
Okay. So are you connecting with LTV then, or did you want to use our?
I have my own hotspot on. I'm in the meeting. We said this earlier that I was in the waiting room.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, Matt, can you let
That's Christine Hartman, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yep, I'm admitting her now.
You can let her in, then she can share the presentation. Thank you.
So while that's happening, just want to introduce the NYPA program. Currently, NYPA is assisting 143 communities in New York State, and they're converting to currently 200,000 LED streetlights. So you're one of many municipalities across the state that are taking on this endeavor, and the commitment of the state to assist communities with this by providing engineering services, construction management services, is been a great benefit to New York State and to the environment. Just a little bit about our firm. I'm the Director of Electrical Engineering for Guth DeConzo and a Senior Lighting Designer. I have over 20 years experience in lighting and in construction. So we bring to this project an experienced team that is capable of looking at all the aspects that are required to properly design this system. We are currently working with 70 of those 140 communities, and we are responsible for approximately 100,000 conversions across the state in different aspects of either design or implementation. Guth is a member of the IES, which is the Illumination Engineering Society, that governs how you're supposed to design lighting. New York State has adopted that IES, those design guidelines, and we strictly follow those design guidelines to ensure that the system that we're providing you is a safe and sustainable system. We can go to the next slide, design considerations. Just want to let you know that the primary focus of an engineer is to provide a safe and sustainable system. There are a lot of factors that go into the design of that system, and we follow those, the guidelines set by the Illumination Society Design Guide. Pedestrian safety is the #1 reason why a municipality provides street lighting as a service to a community. The pedestrian conflict between cars and people, it can be very dangerous if you do not provide adequate light. And that is the main reason why that service is provided across the United States. So that is the key component to what an engineer does when they are making sure that they're designing a system properly, is to make sure that the pedestrian conflict and the safety of those pedestrians are the utmost important. Secondarily, we look at the energy savings. The energy savings actually pays for this project and allows for you to have this project and this upgrade without any amount of money out of pocket to by your taxpayers. The savings pays for the project in its totality. So you really can't have a better project than one that costs the taxpayers zero money. Fixture performance is something that we look at. We make sure that we are selecting fixtures that are going to last the test of time. We're using high grade fixtures that are utility grade and have the best components and chips in them to make sure that we are meeting the requirements of those guidelines set by the IES. We do look at the existing conditions very closely. We look at we do measurements, and we're out there looking at the quality of the existing lighting and what is there. Ultimately, we're providing you with a 1-for-1 replacement. And then as directed, we are also able to look at special considerations and be able to make corrections where lighting may be missing or substandard. We do consider dark sky compliance as a key component to our design considerations. We're not always capable of meeting every requirement of the dark sky compliance, and that's really determined by the community and what their standards are. But what we do try to do is to validate their concerns, listen to what they are saying and what is important to them, and then meet somewhere in the middle, making sure that we can provide a safe and sustainable solution that also considers dark sky compliance. And I'll talk about that further. And then ultimately the environmental impact. There's been a lot of articles and a lot of studies that have that talk about how the scatter of blue light can affect migration of birds, insects, water animals. There's all sorts of human-centric issues that come with being under high levels of blue light for sustained periods of time. Our design puts the least amount of light possible on the roadway and does the least amount of negative impact possible. And we provide you with a dimming system that allows you to reduce that output considerably when the pedestrian conflict is not an issue. So we can talk about that as well. But the environmental impact is absolutely something that we considered in this design. So design considerations for the next slide. This is a full engineering design. We have completed photometric analysis, billing analysis, asset verification, and full conditions assessment. We are, like I stated, we are putting the lowest possible wattage fixture to meet the minimum requirements to provide a safe and sustainable system. The majority of the fixtures are around 35 watts. And when we dim them down to 80% out of the box, they are closer to 28. If you were to consider adaptive dimming, where the pedestrian conflict is limited and you're in your residential areas, there is precedence in the United States to be able to dim your fixtures down to 50% between 11 and 4 a.m. Therefore, your output of your wattage would be around 14 watts, which is very much in line with some of the asks of the dark sky community. So we have provided a system that is capable of really limiting the environmental impact of these lights, but also still providing a safe system when you have pedestrians who are sharing the roadway. You're a beach community. You have people that are out exercising, walking their dogs, coming back from the beach at all times of the day and evening. And we got to make sure that we provide motorists enough time to react to unforeseen circumstances. And that is the reason for street lighting. The proposed lighting system is designed to limit the negative impacts in the environment and people. And we make great care to make sure that we're doing that. Design considerations, collar temperature has been a very frequent topic of consideration here. And I just wanted to provide you with what our firm's recommendations are for the color temperature in your community. Ultimately is the decision of the board, what color temperature you would like to put into your community. But we have done a considerable amount of research and want to make sure that we go over what we believe is the best color temperature for your community. We recommend 2700 Kelvin temperature for your community. And there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, 2700 Kelvin is a good blend of white light and warm light. 22 Kelvin is at the absolute bottom end of the white light spectrum. In order to accomplish 2200 Kelvin, you're taking a blue LED and you're coating it with phosphors. The difference between the blue amount of blue in a 22 Kelvin light chip and a 27 Kelvin light chip is very minimal in difference. The 2200 Kelvin does have blue light. The 2700 Kelvin does have blue light. The way that you limit the impact is you dim the fixtures and you put the correct amount of light on the roadway so that you're not over lighting the environment and then causing that blue scatter to reflect off of the surface and cause that sky glow. There's been a lot of consideration in this, and the 2700 provides you with a energy efficient chip that is easily sourced. 2200 Kelvin is not easily sourced. It is a custom chip with very long lead times and can be a maintenance nightmare to acquire those fixtures. They are available. There is not a cost difference between 2700 and 2200 Kelvin, but we believe that 2700 Kelvin provides you with the best visual acuity and the best color rendering to be able to provide a safe system. The ability to see small movement from under low light levels from a far distance enables people to react quicker when they're driving. One similar or one scenario that we frequently talk about is having a ball roll between cars into the roadway. Typically, when that happens, it's followed by a little kid. The ability to see that ball roll into the roadway, it's easier to see that happen under 2700 Kelvin than 22 Kelvin. 22 Kelvin is the same color temperature as the existing fixtures that you have in place. 2700 Kelvin is equivalent to an incandescent bulb. It is a very warm and inviting bulb. The 22 Kelvin is very close to a single spectrum light. I do not recommend 2200 Kelvin. Our firm doesn't recommend 2200 Kelvin. We recommend 2700 Kelvin. Ultimately, it is the choice of this town on what they choose, but that is the reasoning for our recommendation and the selection of that currently. Additional considerations, environmental impacts. All Cobra Heads are dark sky compliant that we are recommending. There is, sorry.
Is that 22 or 27?
I think that was actually 5,700 mimicking sunlight. All of the Cobra Heads recommended are dark sky compliant. They have 0 uplight and they are registered as such with their bug rating. All decorative fixtures currently are recommended without globes, which then therefore your LED is at the top of the fixture and is again not presenting any uplight from the fixture, which is helping with that dark sky compliance. Once again, we took great care to make sure that we're limiting the impact and that we're actually reducing the amount of sky glow that is present and enabling your residents to see the stars at night. We again are utilizing the lowest possible wattage fixture. We have done photometric analysis and we have compared those fixtures all the way down to be able to meet the safety requirements set by the RP at the lowest possible wattage. And that's completely different than what you would get from a utility program or an ESCO program, where they're going to use a formulaic approach to it. Well, they'll take your existing wattage fixture and cut it in half and basically utilize the existing design as that, as a premise for executing the retrofit. We do not do that. We look at every single roadway and every single fixture separately and do a detailed design to make sure that we're putting the correct light on every single one of those poles. The adaptive dimming, I highly recommend you consider this and put it into policy that in your residential areas where you have a lower pedestrian conflict at night, utilize that dimming system to be able to reduce the light output to 50%. You will greatly reduce the glare and you will greatly reduce the environmental impact of any blue light, whether it's 2200 or 2700 or 3000 Kelvin. The ability to reduce that output to 14 watts is really going to reduce that sky glow. No matter what you do, you will get some reflection off of the asphalt or the concrete, especially if you have a lighter aggregate in your asphalt, you will get some reflection up. So we try to bring that light level down and that will really greatly reduce it. I do not recommend adaptive lighting in your business districts. You want to make sure that you're maintaining the proper amount of lighting where you have pedestrian conflict. And pedestrian conflict is where they're going to be getting out of their cars, where they'll be walking on the sidewalks, where they'll be crossing the roadways, anywhere near parks, near schools, those types of areas where you have kids or people that are out and about sharing the roadway. You do not want to do the adaptive lighting if there are people in that time frame. And in different seasons, you can change it. If in the summer season, you want to have it be midnight or 1 a.m. in the morning before you change that dim level, you can absolutely do that if you feel that that pedestrian conflict is still present. But maybe in your slower season, be able to take advantage of that dimming earlier in the evening, especially since those lights will be running longer. Next slide, just a little bit about the project overall. We're We are recommending the replacement of 682 fixtures. There's 31 of them in the historic district that are a specific post top. There also are 10 other post tops that are a four-sided kind of typical residential and then there's 641 Cobra Heads. The construction value, including allowances, fees, and short-term financing, is approximately $530,000. Our goal with this project is to never have to come back to you and ask for more money. If there is a reduction in the amount of that this project costs, it goes back to the community. We do not profit from it. There's no better program than where what we spend is all you're going to owe. If we are able to save money by hedging some of those risks and being able to not utilize some of those allowances, that money goes back to the town and reduces what you owe. Therefore, your payback will actually be probably better. And I would say that 95% of our projects come in about 5% under budget.
If I recall, I thought we didn't go through NIPA financing and we bonded $455,000 last December.
It's not about the finance, it's just what the construction cost was.
So it's gone up since what we had anticipated then back in December, what we bonded.
Has been cost increases both with labor and with material, unfortunately. So the new value is around 530. That includes the short-term financing. And there are ways that if you are bonded, you can go into prepayment and reduce that financing cost as we draw from it. So those are things that we can work with your finance department to make sure that we're executing the project in the most fiducious way possible. Your total savings is $55,700. That includes maintenance savings and energy savings. You already own your assets, so there is no converter. You're not purchasing them at this time. So we've done a detailed billing analysis. And the thing about street lighting is that it's a very linear equation. The hours are set by the tariff. It's really just the reduction of the wattage. And therefore, you get that savings, and you'll see it as soon as we make that conversion and update your registry. Your simple payback for this project is under 10 years. So depending on your bonding rate and such, you take the cost of that bond and you add it to the total cost, and that would give you your full payback. I am not privy to that, so I didn't want to go into that. Next slide. This is just a breakdown of how we calculate the savings, the actual energy savings. Your existing systems using 380,000 kWh. Our proposed system is utilizing 122,000 kWh. That even though you're not charged by kW, that is the equivalent of a 63 kW reduction. Your energy savings is 257,000 kWh. That is a very significant reduction. That equates your current billing per year is equal to around $65,000. Your proposed billing will be $21,000. That's a savings of $44,524. The additional money that was quoted in the savings on the previous slide is the maintenance. It's the actual cost to have somebody roll out a truck and be able to replace a bulb or replace a fixture. Next slide. This is the fixture that we recommended for your historic district. There's a total of 31 of them. This is an American-made fixture. It's made out of a aluminum foundry in Pennsylvania. The performance of this fixture is absolutely amazing. As you can see, it has a flat lens at the top. That is where the LED is. It does not have a globe, so it is dark sky compliant. It does show you all of the different reasons of why it is dark sky compliant. It has a finial on the top and decorative coins around the edges. We have had a great success with this fixture across many communities, and it's one that we really love the look of it. There are other options out there. This is if you would want to use a good, better, best analogy, this is in the good, better of like price range, right? So we're not using the lower end and we're not at the higher end. Your decorative fixtures can really have a significant cost. So we wanted to provide you with the economics of a project that has a cash flow positive and provide you a great quality fixture that's going to last you 30 to 35 years, and is really going to, I think, upgrade the overall look of your downtown. There are other options available. They have been provided to the committee that we've been worked with. And if you would like to look at any of those other options and the cost of those, we can absolutely do that. This is your community. I know that decorative fixtures are a very important part of the look and the feel of a community. And we take great care to make sure that we match what is there or make it better. But at the end of the day, it's your community and you have the ability to make that choice. For the 10 that are replacing the four-sided fixtures, we did replace them with a similar fixture. We did remove the lens and put the LED at the top of the fixture to make them dark sky compliant. Once again, if you have a lens inside of a fixture, it'll present 1 to 3% uplight. So removing of that lens and putting the LED at the top of the fixture absolutely will reduce the sky glow and the negative environmental impacts. This is a dark sky compliant as it is currently designed. And then finally, the Cobra Heads. The top picture is your existing Cobra Heads. It has a drop lens with a light source that is inside of that drop lens. It's omnidirectional, and there's a lot of energy waste as the light emits in all directions. The LED fixture that we're proposing is a Phillips fixture. It has integrated discrete boards that are flat. It does not drop below the fixture. There is zero uplight. This is a utility grade fixture that will last probably 25 to 30 years. It's cast aluminum, toolless entry. This fixture is being installed across the state and has received very warm reception about the quality of the light output and how it just kind of blends in. They're not big, ugly, kind of clunky fixtures. These are a nice fixture, and the majority of your fixtures are going to be the smaller version of it at the 35 watts. So they'll have a very small footprint and present a lower glare than the existing fixtures. So that ends our presentation. I really appreciate the ability to speak with you all today. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer them. And I just really happy to be able to work with the town of East Hampton.
Thank you, Bill. Any questions from board members?
Yeah, I have a couple. One, you said that you consider dark sky compliant, but where in this presentation and which lights are not dark sky compliant?
Okay, so the dark sky compliance, those regulations keep kind of changing. The one aspect of this design that really isn't dark sky compliant is the color temperature that we recommend, because they do ask for a 2200 Kelvin. These fixtures, every single one of them that we have currently proposed, are as dark sky compliant as possible and provide zero uplight. That is really, and then the ability to provide dimming and adaptive dimming is what we feel is a great compromise between being fully dark sky compliant, where they want no larger than, I think, a 14 watt fixture, but you can't meet the IES recommendations for the safety at those low wattages. So we provide you the ability to get there during the low pedestrian conflict areas. But at the time when there are pedestrians out there and we need that safety, we can go to the full output of the fixture. So it's hard to, it's a complicated subject as far as the ability to fully meet it. And we do our best to respect it and to understand where they're coming from. And I absolutely love the stars too. So I want to make sure that we're doing our best and the least amount of negative impact as possible. But ultimately, we have to make sure that the residents are safe when they're sharing the road, and that's my job.
So when we talk about the dimming from 35 watt to 14 watt, are we losing energy efficiency, and are we costing ourselves more money as we move? Because that was one of the issues of the 2700 versus the 2200, is that the 2700 is more efficient and that we would save more money in our electric bills than the 2200. So what happens with a dimmable 2700?
Well, all LED fixtures at this point are dimmable. The drivers that they come with the wires that make them dimmable. The color temperature doesn't matter whether or not you dim it or not. The way they create a 22 Kelvin chip versus a 27 Kelvin chip is by adding extra layers of phosphor. Therefore, to get the same amount of output on a 27 to 22 Kelvin, you need more power.
Okay.
Therefore, if we were to do the design at 2200, more than likely we would have to go up a wattage class. Therefore, your savings would be reduced, and you would ultimately be paying more per month to do the same amount of illumination. That's why we feel that 2700 Kelvin is really a sweet spot between, being energy efficient, being respectful to the environment, trying to limit that trespass. Now, giving you the ability to dim it brings it even further and really allows you to considerably reduce that impact of that blue light scatter. And that's why we recommend that adaptive dimming. Whether it's at 2200 or 2700, I would do it either way, if you feel that you can do it in a manner that still protects your residents. And it needs to be a policy that's in place.
And did I understand correctly the difference between 27 and 22 in the blue light realm? In the 2200, you're still in the same blue light realm as you are in the 27?
So you start with the same chip.
Okay.
Whether it's 2200 or 2700, it's a blue LED chip. They coat it with phosphors. There is about a 10 to 15% delta between a 2200 and a 2700 with the amount of blue light that's emitted. But that really changes depending on the chip and how they're sourced and such. So when you use a higher grade chip with a better CRI and that actually mixes the color more responsibly, you definitely reduce that. But there is about a 10% to 15% higher amount of blue light in the 2700 compared to the 2200. 2200 is the lowest possible white light out there, and it's equivalent to a high pressure sodium as far as color is concerned.
Okay.
And you said that the 2200 there are sourcing issues with that.
They are
It's not
still
readily available, and then you also don't certify that as being safe for use on the highways?
Well, I definitely would not recommend it on the highways at high speeds. You just can't react quick enough. It's not. I mean, the DOT reg is still at 4K for anything above 55 miles an hour.
What about in the 40-mile-an-hour range?
In your 40-mile-an-hour range, your 2700 has enough of the full spectrum light to be able to appropriately be able to react. At 2200, you're at almost a narrow or single spectrum light, and you will have a lower visual acuity with a 2200 compared to a 2700. How much of a difference really depends on how good your eyes are. And the aging community absolutely has more difficulty under a single spectrum of light.
Thank you.
But they also have more trouble with disabling glare as well because of the thickness of the liquid behind the eye. So you want to try to make sure that you put the right amount of light out the roadway and be directional with it.
Oh, can you explain a little bit how the dimming works? Is that something that's programmed in? What does it take to change that programming? And can you actually choose to turn off lights within certain hours?
So, okay. There was a lot of questions there, so I'll try to do the
Sorry.
best I can to answer them all quickly. We have recommended an asset management system. That asset management system comes with a node. That node replaces the photo cell. By the tariff, you have to have photo control on every light. So you can either put a photo cell on there, or you can put a smart node. That smart node plugs into the same receptacle that the photo cell. The only difference is that there's 0 to 10 leads coming off of the driver that plug into a fourth and fifth, set of contacts. That set of contacts will then allow you through LTE be able to communicate bidirectionally to that fixture, and on demand you can set a dim level and you can control fixtures in groups. You can control fixtures singularly. It's also a really great way to address a reasonable request. If you have a resident that has a glare issue or that is having trouble with where a fixture is actually placed in comparison and they would like that fixture changed, you can dim an individual fixture. If you have a fireworks display, I don't know if you do fireworks in East Hampton, but if you have a fireworks display and you want to look at fireworks, you could dim them down for 10 minutes to a very low light level and be able to view that without that interruption from the surrounding light. That's commonly done. In the United States, we do not have a precedence for shutting off streetlights. In Europe, there is a precedence for shutting off streetlight, but it's completely different on how they govern it. And in some ways, they're ahead of us, but in other ways, I think it causes some issues because it can be very difficult to navigate the roadways or be able to exit a restaurant when you don't have those lights on and they turn them off at like 10 o'clock at night. So there is no precedence in the United States for that.
Any other questions?
No, you answered my question because I was just thinking at Atlantic Avenue where we had the pole going. When we went down there to look at it, there were all these people walking off the beach. So south of Bluff Road, you might not want to dim it to 80% after 11 o'clock, but north of Bluff Road, you might, because that's more of a residential area. So you had just answered the supervisor and said we can control those individually and in groups.
Absolutely. And we can work, and we would work with you on the commissioning, and obviously take the input of the residents and of the board of where you would like the adaptive dimming and where you don't believe it is appropriate. The nice part is that if you do adaptive dim and you find that it's not working, it can be very easily changed back to full output.
So who gets that control panel?
right.
Is that Kim Shaw?
No,
Are we
no,
giving
that's
it to
me.
her?
I get the control.
Typically, eventually it gets turned over to the DPW or your Department of Works because they're the ones that are managing the system. But it is user-based, and anyone that is assigned a user and a password can have access to that dashboard. And it's actually a Google Map overlay, and you can see each of your assets over that Google Map overlay. Well, in full disclosure, though, in a rural area, we may only be able to connect to maybe 95% of your lights. There may be a few outliers that will be just a photo cell. They'll act like just a photo cell. And if cell coverage does improve, it may be brought into the system. But for the most part, that LTE is utilizing a underused back end band that can pick up a signal even when you don't have cell coverage. So we
brought up cell coverage. That was the one last question I had. And that is, I think that there are cell antennas that can be placed within streetlights as one way of addressing coverage issues or capacity issues. Is that something that can be retrofitted?
That is something that can be
integrated?
considered. The key component to that, though, is availability of fiber at that pole, and you having access to that fiber or having a carrier that has access to that fiber. Typically, what you're referring to is a small cell that can plug into the top of a light fixture. It's a separate system. That system has to be carrier based, otherwise it's not useful. There are independent ones that can replicate signals and the such, but we definitely recommend that if you do invest in small cell technology, that you go with one of the main carriers, especially the carrier that has the most coverage, because that's typically what your residents are using. And the ones that aren't, they are okay with the struggle.
Any other questions?
I do. I got about 5 of them. You just said about the DPW. You've been looking at just town roads, county roads, and state roads, and where our current lighting systems. So that's in the 682 lighting.
Yeah.
All those.
You have about, I believe, and offhand, you have about 134 existing LEDs, I believe. I think that was the total. I don't remember that offhand. So I think your total lighting system is almost 800 assets. You currently own them. We're only touching the ones that you own. We were given that registry, and we were given that by the town, and then we only can upgrade the fixtures that you own.
All right, so Montauk's already been upgraded to LED.
And we are working with a neighboring community as well.
Sag Harbor. Yeah.
And they're really taking they're really kind of waiting to see what you do. And then I believe that they're going to match that. But they have had considerable conversations about the 2700 Kelvin and also the decorative lights. So at this point in time, if you were to change on that, they may change too.
Well, their lighting district uses a four-sided lights on there. I guess if I could just follow up on my questions here.
Yeah.
As far as the control, finally, even if it's a state or county road, the town's DPW and the town entity would be able to control any dimming of those, not just the state or the county. Would we be able to control that? Is there any type of municipal?
Currently own those fixtures, and
Okay.
you currently control those fixtures. I don't know if I would recommend doing adaptive dimming on a state road. A county road is different, but if it's an actual state highway, I would put the amount of light that's proper, and I would leave it there, because typically there are a higher number of vehicles and the such. So I wouldn't do adaptive dimming on state highways.
Okay.
That just would be my recommendation. But county, you have the ability to do that because you own those assets.
Going back to the adaptive dimming, is that within the 200? First of all, what paramount to me is public safety and lighting. And when it comes to the roadways, pedestrian, vehicular interactions, then also appropriate lighting also is a crime deterrent too, particularly in our business areas where we are seeing more and more influx of hooliganism, if one of our people would say it in the town, but crime and such. Yeah. Within the $530,000 is the adaptive dimming part of that?
Yes, the full project includes the asset management, which has the dimming capabilities, full control. That is part of what was specified and included in the project.
And is that included then also in the savings estimate by using adaptive dimming, or would that be a greater savings if we use adaptive dimming? So our payback period would be a sooner time frame than 10 years.
Yeah, so National Grid and I believe NYSEG were the first two to have adaptive dimming tariff or adaptive dimming added to their tariff. So with that precedence, we expect that PSEG or and that Orange and Rockland and Con Ed will follow suit with that, because there's now precedence in New York State. As of right now, PSEG, which is the territory you're in, does not have a dimming tariff. So there is no way for them to recoup those dimming. What it will do, though, is it'll lengthen the life of the fixture, because when you underdrive a driver, you reduce the amount of heat at the board and at the driver, and you extend the life of the fixture. That's why we dim them immediately to 80%, because we do the design to end of life output. And as a LED gets older, 20, 25 years older, it will start to degrade and precipitously degrade towards its end of life. So we design to the end, and somewhere around 15 years, you're going to need to ratchet that up. And then at 20 years, you're going to be at full output. So I hope that answers that question.
That does. I got 2 more. I know I said 4.
No,
5. 4 post locations or 4-sided locations. I believe we have them on Panico Place and also at the commercial docks. Not the commercial docks, but the commercial business area at the Montauk docks. Now, by changing those over, are we also looking at the current state of the posts themselves? Then too, is that going to be part of it? Can we work with our buildings and grounds to make sure that first of all, there'll be a matching in color, that the actual infrastructure of the pole going in is sturdy and stable while we're doing this? So can we work together with our department to make sure at least those posts are looked at that for the infrastructure and stability?
We have done a preliminary conditions assessment.
Thank you.
At this time, we have not recommended the replacement of any poles, but we can absolutely meet with you and we can look at those. Typically, what we would do is utilize the base funds to create, to do the base of the project. And then we have contingency funds that are typically not utilized. Those contingency funds could be used to either upgrade a pole or a few poles if it's necessary. But there's a considerable cost to that.
I understand that. That's what I'm trying to get to.
Color matching, we absolutely do. But with that, your sunlight, the UV, will degrade the color. You will have a light, like kind of black post, right? That has almost a gray tinge to it. And you'll have a beautiful brand new black fixture. They aren't going to look exactly the same, but an easy repaint by the DPW could correct that.
Easy. Four-letter word, be careful there. My last one.
I don't want to get in the business of painting.
I understand.
But we do our best to match those colors.
I thank you, and I thank the Natural Resources Department for putting the examples down Atlantic Avenue. Are those survey results you can be shared with the board members?
Would you like to talk to that?
Thank you.
Okay, yes, so they will be shared.
And that's all I have. I appreciate that.
I have some questions.
Yeah, sure.
So I just want to get a handle on what the overall system is that you're proposing. You're proposing fixtures that are 35 watts, but dimmed to 80% on what you call initial commissioning.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens? Or are they always meant to stay at 80%? Dimmed 80%, which is, so what is that 20% of the wattage is getting used then?
So it'll be 80% of the wattage will be used. We're doing that because we have to design to the end of the life. In 25 years, that fixture is going to put out 80% of what it's normal. So we need that additional threshold to be able to increase. At about 15 years, you'll want to increase that light level to 90% to maintain the same light level, because they will start to degrade very slightly. You won't notice it until it gets to about 10% less. Okay. And then another 5 years, at the 20-year mark, you'll want to go to full brightness, but it'll still be the equivalent same amount of light that we had at that 80%. So that's just making sure that the entire lifetime of that fixture, you have the same output.
So after 10 or so years, the energy that you need to get to the same output, the energy needed increases. Yes, it's a small amount. And it would be probably closer to 15 to 18 years before you start to see that. So I would recommend that you bump it up 10% in its output. But when you're talking a 35 watt fixture, 10% is only 3.5 watts more. And it doesn't matter as far as money is concerned, because you are being charged that 35 watts, regardless of you dim it or not, because of the way the tariff is set. Now, once the tariff changes and you have it at that 80%, you will recoup that 20% based off of whatever that threshold is, but it's incremental. At this point, reduction is huge initially, but you're talking very small amounts of kWh and money, but you will eventually see that savings. Okay. And so then there's where there's not pedestrian conflict out of our business areas, in our residential areas in town, the recommendation is then to dim those bulbs 50% between the hours of 11 p.m. and 4 a.m.
That is
down to 14 watts,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah, or roughly around 14 watts. That is a very, you know, cursory recommendation. I don't begin to fully understand how your roadways are used or what your summer times are like and what time people come back from the beach and when those actually close. We see, though, typically around 11 o'clock, people have kind of gone back to their houses if they're not in restaurants or whatever. So that's why either 11 o'clock or midnight would be a good time to be able to do that dimming. But it's really up to you when you want to do that. In the summertime, you may choose it's 1 a.m. before you start to do that, or midnight. And in the wintertime, you may say at 10 o'clock, it's a ghost town. So let's just start to dim them down. As long as you don't have that pedestrian conflict, you really don't need to maintain that high level of light in those residential areas. We start back up around 4 a.m. because early birds, I'm not one of them, but early birds, they like to get out and they run, they walk their dogs, they're going to work. The construction workers typically are starting to get up and go. There's your schools, people that are getting to school early, they start to get up and go. So you turn the lights back up until dawn hits around 4 a.m. because that pedestrian conflict could start back up. But it's really up to the board and the town when you decide you want to do that adaptive dimming. It's really just what we've seen in other communities.
And from what you're saying, I assume it's also up to us where we're going to do it, because you've just said that you really haven't looked at our roadway systems or the breakup of the town.
We have looked at your roadway. I could make a recommendation, but I don't live here, right? So it's very much your decision. My recommendation is that you do it in your residential areas. If you have, beach access areas, those may not be a good idea to have that adaptive dimming, or maybe that adaptive dimming is a little bit later because you have people coming in and out from the beach early or late. So there are parts of pedestrian conflict that, as an engineer and how we look at these lighting systems, we can't fully predict because we don't live here. We're not here at all hours of the day. I'm not here at 11 o'clock at night seeing how this town lives and breathes.
Understood.
So this is a fairly interactive system. Somebody's going to have to monitor, someone in the town is going to have to make the decisions on what wattage and what adaptive dimming is happening on at least a seasonal level, if not even a lower level than that, or if there's a special event. And so this is a very interactive or system that needs a lot of monitoring.
It can be if you utilize all of its functionality. If you set it and you leave it, it will perform without very much work. What it's going to do is it's going to notify you if you have an outage. It'll notify you if you have an issue. If something breaks or there's a surge in the system and you have fixtures go out, it will send SMS, well, mostly emails, but will allow an email to export to different people in your town so they can manage the workflow of getting that replaced. The whole point of that system really is asset management tracking. It's the ability to know what's happening with those assets. As a additional benefit, you also have on-demand dimming and you have scheduled dimming. So you can utilize those functions. You can schedule different seasons. There's some upfront work that needs to take place, and we'll work with you during that commissioning process to get it set up. But once you set it up, it'll be it'll kind of run, and then you'll get notifications and you'll sign onto the system and you'll see where that is. And then you can create the work order for your DPW to go get it fixed. The nice part is you'll totally change how you interact with the community, because you'll already know there's an issue. When Mrs. Smith from Main Street calls in and says the light out in front of my house is broken.
That could be Amaganset.
Sorry, but you know what I mean. If Miss Overbay was to call in and say the light is out in front of my house. The answer is going to be, we're already aware of that. We've already created a work order. It should be fixed within 10 days. If it's not, please give us another call. So it becomes a proactive way to manage that system. It's
The way the
really
system
should
works,
make it easier.
Yeah, the way the system works now is that our police officers on duty at night are supposed to report streetlights that are out, and they obviously cover the town on their beat, but sometimes a streetlight might be out for several days before we even know it's out. So this would be certainly an advantage for our DPW to know immediately that they get the email saying that Bluff Road and Atlantic street light is out, so they can deal with it immediately. So that's a clear advantage. And then, the board can discuss at some point, how we might configure the initial settings, and obviously it can be adapted to over time.
And we're your consultant, so we're here to help you make those decisions, but I'm not here to dictate it to you.
Are there any other questions for Bo?
Just want to help you out.
Welcome, Bo.
We're 2 hours in.
Yeah, I'm sorry, just one more. It's not really a question. It's just, you said the historic structure, the historic fixtures for Amaganset are kind of in the better range of your good, better, best scenario.
Of pricing.
Of pricing. And pricing. I'd love to see what the best looks like as well.
We have that available to you.
Okay.
Your good is around the $800 to $900 range.
Okay.
Right. Your better is in the $1,300 to $1,200 to $1,300 range, $1,500 range, and your best can be around $2,000, $2,500, depending on how ornate. I do recommend that when you are looking at that you stay towards the dark sky compliant ones.
Yeah. No.
So-
Definitely that. I don't know that Amaganset, I'm speaking for myself, that Amaganset's an ornate community. But so maybe this is the perfect fixture for it, but I just would love to see what the other.
These ones would be for Montauk, right? These fixtures.
No,
That's
these
the-
are for Amaganset.
That's the 31. No, that's a different project.
There's 31 of the.
So you're going to put these, yeah.
Yeah, there's 31 of the existing globes as we're driving in, and then there's 10 of the
resell those
four-sided.
tops because we recently just changed them over. Actually,
You could definitely work towards
I think that's
that.
what we did. We put them out at auction. Actually, made some money back on them.
So when we heard from NIPA last year, we were talking 729 fixtures. So now we're down to 682.
Because you already have some LEDs that are converted, and then we
There
went
was the
through
total
and
number of
verified.
streetlights.
And those LEDs, are they
134 in Montauk.
2,700?
I don't know the color temperature of
So they
those
might be
LEDs.
over 2,700, the ones
I
that
would
you're
have to look.
referring to.
I could try to get eyes out here to take a look at them at night.
Would you be installing the nodes into those fixtures as well so that
Yes.
they're dimmable?
Yes, we would be.
Oh, good question. So the ones that we put in Montauk weren't dimmable?
Not the ones.
They may not be
They
dimmable
were
if
done
they
like
don't
4
have
years
the
ago.
proper wiring.
No, the ones we did LED are the ones on North Main Street down by the docks, head of the harbor. Those were Cobra historical looking ones that are downlit that most recently were changed. I think those might be some of the ones that most recently been changed over to a LED or a different LED lighting. They've been working on that recently.
So the board will have some time to think about this, and we can reconvene and discuss and make some decisions.
Thank you for your information.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your patience, actually. Sorry.
Well, here, you know what it is, Bo, is that there's a lot of projects, infrastructure that the town does per hamlet. We build something here, we build a road. This is actually something that the whole entire town in one decision is going to be visibly seen. So it takes a lot to process then too. It's very town wide. You don't get that as often on some of the projects and decisions we make about infrastructure.
Everyone will use it.
Yeah,
for sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our next topic for discussion is the Brooks Park assessment. We have Drew Bennett, our site engineer and consultant, to review his memorandum.
Good morning, everyone, or I should say good afternoon.
Good evening.
Feels like it.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Thanks, Drew.
Thank you, Drew.
Can I give Mr. Mullin a copy? Would you mind?
Sure.
That's fine. Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
If he has more.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Drew Bennett, and I'm a consulting engineer, and I'm here on behalf of the town of East Hampton. And first of all, I'd like to say I appreciate all the comments and input I heard this morning. It's nearly an hour of input, a lot of it related to Brooks Park. So I think that's part of the process. We chew on it, we digest, we refine, and we hopefully move forward. So again, I do appreciate all that. I am familiar with the property. In 2016, in 2016, I performed a condition assessment of the buildings and submitted a report to the town board. And in 2016, 2017, we prepared plans and specifications for restoration of the buildings. And as I understand it, that there was not really a viable user entity that was going to take over the buildings at that time. So those plans didn't really move forward. And then we heard again from the town in very late 2021, and we conducted a follow-up condition assessment of the buildings in, I guess it was the first week of February 2022. And we have had the opportunity to look at the Devonshire report, and we've also looked at the Brooks Park Arts and Nature Center draft management plan, and found those documents to have very useful information. We have been working with the Town Land Management Committee and a subcommittee of the Town Land Management Committee. And, excuse me. And so we've had several work sessions and discussions to try to figure out what is the scope of work for this particular project. And we thought it would be very useful to try to figure out the funding part of this, because at least in the people in the circle that I was meeting with, the scope may be dependent on the funding. So a very important aspect of this project is what is CPF eligible for funding, and I think that and the condition of the buildings are two very, very important things that we need to discuss and review and need some direction in terms of how to move forward. So the big change between 2016 and February 2022 is that the buildings, and you may already know this, so I'm going to go over very quickly, but the buildings have been very badly vandalized, and essentially every window and door has been broken out. And the roof of the residence has a hole in it, it's beginning to leak. And the Brooks Studio, when I was in there on February of 2022, it's been tarped for a long period of time, 5 or 10 years, and the water is infiltrating the building. It's extensively infested with mold and mildew, but most importantly, the unique sawtooth roof, which was over the main studio of the building, was supported by an I-beam. And that I-beam, when I was there in February, has basically dropped. The columns that were holding up the I-beam went through the floor, and the I-beam is dangling on 4 cables. So the building, the main part of the Brooks Studio is now beginning to twist and slowly collapse. And you can see the twisting in the walls, and going inside of it is really not a very safe place at this point in time. The foundation is fine, but the bulk of the uprights have suffered pretty significant damage. And then the rear portion of the Brooks Studio, the snow went through the roof basically. And so you can see daylight through the walls, and you can see daylight through the roof. And there is a lot of wood decay inside and out. So the question was, and we discussed this with the Land Management Committee and the subcommittee and Scott Wilson. So the question was, how do we put this back? How do we save this? And so most of you know who I am, but I'll just give you a quick recap for the people who don't know. So I've been practicing for 39 years, and I've had the good fortune of working on the restoration teams of Thomas Brand Studio, the Garden Mill Cottage, the Osborne House on Newtown Lane, Sailor Lester House, Duck Creek Barn, and Second House. So over the last 15 or so years, we've had quite a bit of experience here locally on what it takes to try to restore these homes and put them back into public use. And so after looking at the condition of Brooks Studio, if we were to put it back, I don't think that it's a situation where we can strip off the sheetrock and do mold and mildew remediation. There's enough of the frame that's missing, essentially. It's turned into, the word I used was muck. Part of the back part of Brooks Studio, the roof is collapsed and the studs are basically soft, very, very, very soft. So from a building point of view, you obviously would try to save and preserve as much as you can, but in my judgment, you just can't patch it. You have to basically take it down, take out the contents that you can save, and try to put it back together. And so that became a reconstruction versus a restoration. So we put together some cost estimates of what it would take to restore the other three buildings. And I should say that even though they've been vandalized and there's a leak in the residence roof, that they're certainly salvageable. They need some work. And we need to figure out exactly what we're going to preserve and exactly what the end use is going to be and who's going to be using them. And we need to get all that kind of input. But we tried to do some preliminary scoping and preliminary budgeting so we could figure out what work would fit in which cost bin, basically. And it's preliminary. So these are preliminary judgments, preliminary interpretations, but it gave us a sense of what it's going to take to try to restore this property and where the money might come from. So, with that, in the handout I gave you, we basically came up with two different scenarios. It doesn't mean that these are the only scenarios, but they seem to be the two scenarios that we sort of settled on with the folks that we were working with and discussing on. So what's a little unique about these historic structures, the property is beautiful, without a doubt. But what's a little different than some of the other historic buildings that we've worked on is that the residence is about 450 or 500 feet or 600 feet from the road, from next path, and the studio itself is 800 or 900 feet from the path, from next path. And if you're going to make them publicly accessible, you have to provide a road, you have to provide fire protection, et cetera. So installing a road, some people felt that it may change the character of the property itself. So that's something that needs to be considered. And the site work ends up being fairly substantial in terms of, do you provide an improved parking area? How much parking is needed? How wide does the fire access road need to be, et cetera? So we put all these scope items in the memo. I went through it in a fair amount of detail. And the scoping was based on the plans that we had, prepared back in 2017 with some of the ideas that were put forth by the Arts and Nature Committee, or their report and so on and so forth. They had suggested a parking area, which, seemed to make sense, and we put that into the equation. So I think the bottom line is that it became clear that so there's two different things here that we need to pay attention to. So in some of the comments I heard this morning, there's two different guidelines, I guess, to try to keep it simple. There's the National Historic Standards and Guidelines that are presented by the National Park Service, and that's one guiding document. But another important guiding document is the Rules and Regulations of the Community Preservation Fund, which, as it's evolved over the years, has written down certain guidance about how to spend funds and what's eligible for CPF funding. And they have provided fairly detailed guidelines with examples on what's in and what's out, basically. And so we did the best we could to apply those. I'm not the one that's interpreting them. I have an interpretation, but it was sort of done by committee, so to speak. And the numbers are preliminary, and we did our first cut at what fits in and what fits out. So with that said, I think what we concluded based on the guidelines that we have is that CPF would not fund for adaptive reuse of the property. So if it's not historic, if it's going to be adapted to a different type of use, CPF may not fund it. And that's something that needs to be looked at more carefully, but we need to know that going in, not as the bills are coming in. And that would include either the soft cost for engineering or architecture or other types of research or the construction costs. CPF most likely would not fund most of the site work. CPF, while the National Park Service standards allow for reconstruction as part of historical preservation, it appears that the CPF guidelines would not fund reconstruction. And that was the initial interpretation. So, and that's important in terms of the definition, in terms of whether Brooks whether Brooks Studio is going to be preserved, because if you have to take it down and put it back, most people would say that's reconstruction, even though it may have some historical elements to it, and that we were able to save some aspects of it or elements of it. It appears it may not fit in the CPF funding bin. And so the cost to reconstruct Brooks Studio, if that's the right word, are substantial. You'll see that in the cost table on the last page of your handout, which is sort of a summary of, high-level summary of what our cost estimates were and which ones fitted, which pieces of the scope fit into which bins. So option 1, which basically calls for reconstructing the Brooks Studio, we estimate the reconstruction cost of the Brooks Studio at about $1.5 million. So if that doesn't fit in the CPF bin of funding, the funding has to come from somewhere else. So our estimate for option 1, which is saving and reconstructing the Brooks Studio, which would include access 800 feet from next path for fire protection and so forth, about 1.3 million would be CPF eligible, and about 2.5 million would come from some other funding source, which is a very significant number. And is part of the reason that we're here is we kind of came to a point in the road where we need to understand the cost before we move forward of what the scope of work is for the town of East Hampton is really where we are, and we need a little direction. If we do option 2 and the Brooks Studio is not in the plan, obviously the costs come down quite a bit for, the cost of, we no longer include the cost of reconstructing the Brooks Studio. We still have some site work, we still have restoration work, et cetera, but the cost comes down. The CPF eligible funding would be about 1.5 million, but there would still be a significant amount of work that would be outside of the CPF funding envelope, and that would still be approximately $600,000. So in summary, there's 4 buildings on the property. It's a very special property. 3 of the buildings can certainly be restored. They need a lot of work. It's very sad that they've been vandalized to the extent that they have been. In my opinion, the Brooks Studio is in really bad shape and is in the process of collapsing, and will be very hard to quote unquote patch it up. You really, I think, looking at trying to take it down and trying to re-erect it, the same architecture and the same shell, to have it as a functional type building. And there's lots of discussions on details about that. So that's kind of where we are. So we've struggled with trying to get some direction in terms of what should be in and what should be out. And I appreciate the opportunity to come before the board and present this information. And as I said earlier in my remarks, I do appreciate the comments and input from the community and the people on the phone. So I'm open to any questions that you have.
So I think, one of the fundamental questions that we're faced with and things that we'll have to work through is obviously funding. And, the question about what is an acceptable CPF expenditure and what isn't, I think is somewhat open to interpretation. But also the fact that I think the Department of Interior has standards and they recognize the reconstruction of buildings as being an acceptable way of preserving the history. I think maybe we should seek additional guidance as to the expenditure of CPF funds. I know that in speaking with Assemblyman Fred Thiel, who authored the CPF legislation originally, that there are a number of questions that have come up across the board, particularly around historic structures and properties. And he's expressed an interest in convening an advisory group to help guide the 5 East towns on some of these questions that we're dealing with. So I think that's one avenue that we should perhaps pursue. Again, I think if the U.S. Department of Interior standards hold that the reconstruction of a building in this particular case, is significant in preserving the history, and maybe that's an approach we should look at. The numbers are pretty staggering, and the amount of vandalism that's taken place and the number of times that we've tarped the buildings, and the tarps through weather events or vandalism have come off the buildings, and the buildings have been boarded up to protect them. And it's just been an ongoing struggle to try and preserve these buildings absent clear pathway forward. So I think again, that's something we'll have to look at. The other thing, at least from my standpoint, and it's always been somewhat problematic with the preservation of historic structures, is while the CPF allows us to purchase properties for preservation, the current setup doesn't allow for the expenditure of funds for the ongoing operation and maintenance, which puts us in a difficult position, because as we continue to try to preserve historic structures, we're adding significant expenses to the general fund, which is already, as everyone might guess, already very well stressed in terms of being held to a 2% tax cap, and at the same time having to deal with ever expanding costs across the board, whether it's benefits, health insurance, fuel, whatever. So my feeling is we should try not to put this onto the general fund, and that any preservation really should come from the preservation fund. Those are my general thoughts, just leading in. We do have, I think, a resurgence of interest in this particular property. I know you've all received emails of support for preserving this property. There is an organization that's starting to coalesce and has worked for the ongoing preservation of this. So, we've had bumps in the road, we've had a number of hurdles, but there seems to be a much broader awareness and interest in preserving this property. You heard some of the comments today across the board, people just generally weighing in who really were calling about some other topic, but said, well, I want to just raise my voice in support of that as well. We heard today an hour worth of community members calling in, and everyone was speaking about preserving one thing or another for the most part, whether it's a little piece of green space in a very heavily developed neighborhood, or whether it was Brooks Park, or whether it's our night skies. So those are my general comments. I'm sure board members have a lot of questions and comments of their own.
I'll start. I do think that there is some subjective reasoning between reconstruction and restoration, and the opinions board for the CPF, I don't think it's met in years. So this is certainly something that I think we take to the CPF board. The centerpiece of this piece of property is the Brooks Studio itself. And it has a significance in not only its architecture, and that's part of what's important. If the foundation is 100%, that makes me feel a lot better about any kind of reconstruction that might have to take place. And, windows do get broken. We probably would have replaced them even, if every other part of the structure was standing, they probably would have needed to be replaced just for, windows deteriorate anyway. Look at our offices. So,
for reminding us. Winter's coming.
It's not just about Brooks Park, this particular piece of property. It is about that whole movement of the abstract expressionists and that it came to East Hampton. It wasn't just about Brooks Park. It wasn't just, them as a couple. It wasn't just about Pollock Krasner, but also Elaine and Bill de Kooning, John Little. We could start going, Lassow. There's a list of abstract expressionists that were part of the history of this town. So I think it's very important that we keep this history and can educate others. As I think it was Marietta, you said it so beautifully that, this is what we get to do so that other generations, you said it better than I'm saying it now, that the future is going to be able to look at. And this is what I think my job is, sitting here. So I would like to move forward before we get too far down the road of the buildings collapsing in some way. I do think we can look at the numbers. I'm not sure, we've got a lot of parking for this area, and whether it needs to be paved parking, whether we can do grass parking as we've done at Duck Creek, whether we need lighting, whether, because is it going to be a nighttime venue? Perhaps, perhaps not. Maybe we don't need all of the lighting infrastructure that we're talking about right now. Maybe we can cut these costs down so that it's something that we can work on as a community. I think it's important not only for East Hampton, but yeah, I think someone else said it today too. It's important for the Springs community because it was an important part of where they were. They were in Springs. These artists were in Springs. So those are my comments.
Any other comments?
No, I just agree with Peter and Sylvia in taking a really hard look at this for the community of Springs, for all the reasons that Sylvia and Peter spoke of. It's an 11-acre property. That's a really good place to put some money in Springs that the public can enjoy. 11 acres. That's not something we see every day, and have the ability to do something about and preserve that for the future. So I just am lending my support to investigating ways that this can be done.
So I'll lend my ears to it. I've never, what is against some what's written about me in emails that get sent to my desk. I've never been against this project. I'm more against the use of funding that's not allowed for this project. And also, secondly, that we now have on the town's hands an attractive nuisance that we should be very thankful that someone hasn't been hurt in right now. And that's straight, as I've said the entire time right now. If this project comes to fruition through funding sources that are legally allowable to do, I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with my child or some other child's going to go play in this dilapidated state and get injured, and I didn't take care of it as a town council person. That's why I have moved forward at other times to try to make the property as safe as can be. We see that there's funding lines that could be and not could be done. There's organizations that want to raise money. I've done that before in the past, more than what's actually here. And two, so there are options to do so. There is an opinions bureau for the CPF. They haven't met in years.
I know.
And per last discussion that we've had with Fred Thiel, he didn't want us to even put another person from the town of East Hampton on it because he wanted to change it. I think we have to be very careful about how we use CPF funds for the town of East Hampton. We've been there before. We don't want to get there again. But again, as far as the project right now, those are my two concerns: proper funding sources, the use of it, and also public safety on it right now. And that's where I've always been on this project.
So David, I agree with you that it's a attractive nuisance at this point. And I think that means that we can't wait. We need to find the funding now. We need to do it now. We need to hope that the CPF could possibly, and if it doesn't, I'm willing to put money in from the town. I think it's that important for this community. We've done it for other projects. We've done it for Second House. And I think it's time that we do something here in Springs. And I'd like to see us move forward as quickly as possible for the reasons you stated and for the condition of the buildings themselves. And we don't sit on this. This is something that has to happen now.
I also think you're a little light on your estimates of labor, Drew. You have about 160 hours in there for plumbing or for electrical or interior, 160 hours you have for interior renovation of that. That's 4 guys at just 2 weeks. So I think some of your labor ones are a little light on there then too. So I understand your concerns.
Yep.
Those are my 2 concerns as this discussion comes forward. I think the best thing that happened here is we have listened to the organization that wanted us to procure these numbers. It makes us allowable to make a better decision as a board. So I appreciate that, but I do think you're light on a couple things. That's my own opinion.
So if I could just make a few comments, I've always said since my time on the school board that a budget is a reflection of the community's priorities. And I can see that the community, saving Brooks Park is a community priority. So I think we can figure out the funding. For me, the question becomes, do we have an organization though that can carry the ball like they have done it Duck Creek, like the Montauk Historical Society is doing with Second House and now Carl Fisher, which we're going to be talking about. I haven't had an opportunity to meet with any folks from the Duck Creek, I guess it's Arts and Nature Center. Brooks Park, I'm sorry, Brooks Park Art and Nature Center. That would be the next step for me, is I would like to know more about your organization, meet with some of, your board members so that I can have a better understanding and know that if we move forward with this, which I'd like to do, that it's in good hands. Great. Thank you.
So one of the other questions that's come up and really requests has been, and you've heard some of the callers calling in talk about, this property being on the seven most endangered, the 4 most endangered. I mean, this property clearly is endangered. I don't think anybody would disagree with the fact that its current condition is endangering it probably more than anything. But whether or not the board would like to have an additional report put together by a preservationist, if that's another additional avenue we wish to pursue, to have it looked at through the eyes of a preservationist. And, I think some folks feel that having that sort of a view or review of the property conditions report might be helpful in terms of establishing what's really important from a preservation standpoint. I think much of the studio is, constructed with typical construction methods and materials, although the design is perhaps a little bit different than typical. With the sawtooth is more like a New York City kind of loft. It's kind of industrial type of setup with the clear story windows and the sawtooth roof, which I think ultimately is responsible for its demise because it wasn't properly flashed from the beginning, and the design collected water and snow and imperiled the structure. But is that something that the board would consider pursuing? Are we comfortable with an assessment, the multiple assessments that we've had to date?
I mean, I think at this point, I think it's important to move forward as fast as possible without any more study or look at or consideration of, some of these things. I think we need to do it now.
I'm very comfortable with Drew Bennett does. I think I've worked in multiple projects with Drew on that. He has worked, with Mr. Devonshire, looked at Mr. Devonshire's thing, but Drew is a man of integrity, and he's lived out here his entire life, and he knows.
I don't disagree with that. I'm very comfortable with Drew. I just thought I would bring that up since that was a recurring question or position that some others had brought up.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with the structural analysis. A structural analysis is a very factual thing, and I don't think. I think whatever lens you're going to look through, it's still going to cost the same to restore it, and the structure will still have to be brought up to speed.
And code.
So, anything else at this point?
So who is going to be in charge of this project on this board?
So the Property Management Committee has been very much involved with this project.
Yeah.
I'm the liaison to that. So in terms of next steps, we're looking to get clarification on additional clarification on funding, potential funding from CPF, and then also looking at, from what I'm hearing from the board, other sources of town funds. Mm-hmm. And I think, some of the funds that could potentially be raised privately as well for certain aspects. So I think, that's where we stand. And then trying to get together a work plan. John, did you want to speak?
Forgive me, and it'll be brief. Back in the day, we engaged Mr. Bennett, a very capable engineer. He did a study of the space, and it was restorable, and he responded to that. And the town had made it a historic site, and the responsibility for the facility was the town's, and it was let go. And now it has deteriorated. The studio, which is, forgive me folks, but it is a cathedral to mid-century abstract art. It's a fabulous space and a significant piece of architecture. Again, forgive the architect, and an architect, not the architect for that building. But now it has deteriorated badly, as Mr. Bennett has documented carefully. And the answer, if there is an answer to the Brooks Studio, and I think that it is, as I said, the cathedral of that project, is reconstruction. It's tumbling down. I'm glad to see that this new group of people that have come together is also reaching not just for the art, but for the nature. Charlotte Park was very much a naturalist and a nature lover. And as I said, in the meeting, when you all declared it a historic site, forgive my Texas accent. No, I don't carry a gun. I'm from Texas.
Good to know.
If you were going to have a nature trail connecting Red Dirt and Neck Path, that it would be named the Redneck Dirt Path.
Thank you, John. Okay, so I guess we can move forward. Drew, thank you so much. Rework will be in touch. That brings us up to the Carl Fisher draft management plan. Do we have Scott Wilson in the waiting room?
Yep, admitting him now.
Thank you very much.
I'm here.
Hello, Scott.
Hi. Okay, let's see if I can share a screen here. So, after receiving an historic landmark designation, the town actually acquired the Carl Fisher House property from the Aiken family in December of 21. And it's been very helpful to work with the Montauk Historical Society, who currently holds a short-term license agreement to help jumpstart working plans for future uses and building code compliance for museum use. But prior to consideration of a long-term license agreement, it's important for the town to review and adopt a management plan for the property as a whole to help guide the long-term use, management, and maintenance of the property and associated structures. The current draft is dated July 13th. It follows a standard format that we use for all of our management plans. We do an introduction, a description of the site, access and parking, management goals and issues, recommended improvements, permitted uses, and restrictions. The Property Management Committee has reviewed, revised, and is putting forth this plan for review by the town board. And with your indulgence, I just want to read a bit of the management goals. The primary goal of this property is preservation and protection of its historic structures, as well as its beautiful grounds for the use and enjoyment of the public. To this end, a goal would be the creation of a dynamic museum in the main house that would bring to life the tumultuous decades of the 1920s and 30s in Montauk, the era in which Carl Fisher reimagined the hamlet as the Miami Beach of the North and went all out to build it. These 20 years took us from Prohibition, local rum running, the Roaring 20s, to the stock market crash, depression, devastating hurricane of 38, and rumblings of a world war. Everything that was happening in the wider world was reflected right here in Montauk, and Carl Fisher, who came here in the 20s brimming with optimism and left in the 30s bankrupt, provides the perfect lens through which to understand the vicissitudes of the era. I've been through these buildings a number of times, and I think it would actually be amazing to open this grand structure for museum use to showcase this concept and time period. With this plan, while this plan helps the public to understand a broad stroke in use management, further details as far as use modernization regarding fire code, ADA compliance would actually be discussed later after the adoption of this management plan and a license agreement. That, of course, being followed by engineering, building plans, historic consultants, and RFPs. But the management plan post-acquisition is actually the first step. So I'm here in case the board has any questions regarding this plan. Again, I mentioned that the Property Management Committee has reviewed in total this plan and is recommending it to move forward. If the town board is accepting of this plan, then we would move forward secondarily with a public hearing. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to help answer.
Board members have any questions for Scott?
I just have one request. Could you please add page numbers?
Oh, yes.
Makes me crazy. Yep.
Paginate.
But otherwise, I'm in full agreement. The real details, it's really in the license agreement where we're going to really get into the specifics.
That's
right. We can't really move forward with a license agreement until after we've adopted a management plan. And anyone else have any comments?
Yeah, I agree with what Kathy just said about the license agreements. There's the details here. There's three things I would like to just potentially add or change. One is access and parking. I think we should put a caveat that all parking requests will be reviewed by the East Hampton Town Planning Department or by the Department of Land Management. Under restrictions, which would have been page 1, 2, 3, 7 maybe. I think we should add number 12. Restrictions would be vaping, smoking, and alcohol consumption without East Hampton Town, or maybe even licensee approval, because it would be a park at that time. So that might be something we want to add into that location there.
Okay.
And
Because I think what you have is the concessions will do the alcohol, but I think that, no vaping, no smoking, no alcohol makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Is that not standard in all of our?
It generally is, and it's just, it didn't make it on this
Got
list. So I agree with that. We should add that.
And the only other one under number 4, goals and objectives. It's the third to last paragraph. It talks about on-site events and fundraisers. I think that should be left to the license one where it says including but not limited to all the way through tours to dinners. I think we should take out that aspect and that will go into the license agreement and keep it a little bit more broader. Yeah.
Okay.
From including towards
Everybody
dinners.
okay with that? That's fine with me.
But the rest of it's
And again, like both of you have said, the details will be in the license agreement.
And I do really like the history of the property, also the description of the site. That was well done.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mia. She did a great job. All right, I'll make those corrections and send that to the board.
Okay, thank you very much, Scott.
And then next step, Scott, is that you have to do a public hearing for this, or?
Yes.
You have to do a public hearing, yes.
Okay. So we'll schedule it for public hearing.
Okay, will do.
Okay, that brings us up to proposed stop signs at Town Line Road intersections. And, this topic came up again recently, unfortunately, due to a very tragic event, a young person being killed on their bicycle on Town Line Road. And I think it really refocused both the village of Sagaponack and the town and the residents in that area on traffic safety. And I met on July 18th with Mayor Tillotson, Sagaponack, and Deputy Mayor Thayer, and had a discussion about the various stop sign locations. And the village would like to move forward with putting stop signs at those locations. As you know, Town Line Road is divided pretty much along the center line. The western portion is Sagaponack Village. The eastern portion is in East Hampton Town and Wainscott. And so it would require a coordinated effort to have rational, logical intersections. I don't think either entity really could operate unilaterally and have that work out well. We had a similar sort of situation at Collins Avenue and Occoquan, where a portion of the intersection is in the village of East Hampton, and the other portion is in the town. So, Jeremy, you had, I guess you're presenting the next one, Sands, but Ann, you have the
They're up on the,
visuals up. Okay.
just the
Very
the
good.
overview here.
So you can see Parsonage.
Sorry.
Parsonage Lane is at the top of the screen. Then you see Hedges Lane, Wainscott, Main, and then further down is Daniels Lane. There's already a stop sign that the village has placed on the village portion of the property. And it certainly seemed to make sense to be consistent and place stop signs on the town portion there, as well as Hedges and Parsonage. The only question I have for board members, and certainly we want to hear your comments on all those intersections, but Wainscott Main Street is relatively close to Hedges, I guess it is, to the north. And, does it make sense to also then have three-way stop at that location as well? That is something I think the village was also in favor of.
Which was the last one, Peter, you were talking about?
Wainscott Main Street.
And
So Wainscott and Town Line is
Okay.
relatively close. It's not too far from the south. I don't know the actual distance between.
It can't be more than 100 yards.
It's probably a football field or less.
Farm field. Yep.
I spoke to Steve Lynch about this. If Sagaponic is going to be putting that stop sign, proposed stop sign in the, to the northwest corner,
Which intersection are you
you're
speaking?
talking about Hedges,
Okay.
then I think we need to make it a three-way because
Yeah,
it's either a
Absolutely.
three-way
And
or a
that's-
one-way.
That's the intention, is for all of these intersections to be three-way stops. Everybody's stopping.
Okay.
I mean, this road was never intended for the volume of traffic.
No, clearly not. And, it was a rural road, and due to the highway, having reached capacity most hours, people's apps, their Google Maps or Waze are diverting people all over into residential neighborhoods. And it's a chronic problem throughout. It happens everywhere, all over town now. And so, being that Town Line Road is a perfectly straight road, pretty much from Wainscott Hollow, all the way down to the beach, people just put the pedal down.
Yeah.
Yep.
And,
Yep, seen that.
so if the board has any questions.
No, as long as we're doing it in coordination with Sagaponic Village and all of them, I support them. If we find that, on Hedges and Wainscott Main, it starts backing up potentially, we're going to hear about it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And then we can work in coordination again. But I think this is good effort, Peter, to try to take care of this. I know we are talking about the right of ways in there, making sure
I
that.
was going to get to that next.
I'll let you go.
But any other questions or comments about the intersections? Okay, so we can notify the village of that, and we'll schedule public hearings.
Yep.
The other topic which David brought up was the right of ways. If you'll look, there is a map also of the road end at Town Line Beach, and this is a very narrow section there. There's no real area for turning around, and long-term, the village owns that piece of property that you see. It looks like there's a circle there, dirt, there's vegetation and like a circle. They are planning on having a more formal turnaround area at some point. They've asked if we would consider having no parking the first 60 feet so of our right of way, to ensure that there's enough room for emergency vehicles to get through and to also people to turn around. So it seemed like a reasonable request. Also, I think we need to continue our effort to have encroachments within the right of way removed. on this road and many others actually throughout town. There's been encroachments. We've heard from residents about concerns about that. It is a safety issue, often pushes pedestrians out into the roadway because of those encroachments. And also this area is town beach parking. We heard a caller earlier today talking about access to beaches. This would provide parking along that road if the obstructions were cleared further north as well.
Yeah, we've actually had some special event permits applications put in, and we've had to deny them because of the drop off there.
So I think I've heard from residents as well asking that there be no special events at that road end because it's so narrow and congested and parking's difficult.
Before we notice this for public hearing, I know Sylvia's got a Wainscott CAC meeting on Saturday, so we should probably,
absolutely.
I'm supportive of the no parking, but, I'd love to hear from the.
Yeah, I sent the information to them. I know you've been talking to Susan Macy, I
Right.
think, so, who is a member of the Wainscott CAC.
So I'm happy to wait until we get comments back from them. I know from my past experience as liaison, of course, it's been a number of years now, but even then there were concerns about those intersections and there seemed to be support. So I'm happy to hear from them to see what they think about this plan.
Okay.
So
and again, the village, I think, was very much planning on going forward. And I know a number of the people who are in the CAC and Wainscott residents also attended the village meeting about traffic safety as well. So
the village owns this.
That's my understanding. The village is also working on their side of the road and this will probably be over the next year, an effort to, clear obstructions from the right of ways as well.
Because I know we have parking that's allowed pretty much all the way up towards.
We have parking
Wainscott,
from
Main Street.
Exactly.
So-
On the east side's resident beach parking all the way from the road end now, all the way up to, I think it's past Wainscott Hollow Road.
So, as you know, I hate losing beach parking, but again, public safety is paramount. And one of the issues down there becomes you can't get emergency equipment down there if needed be at that time or for that turnaround. So for this one, I'm supportive of it. I hope the village of Sagaponic moves forward on that. And then maybe we have to look for other locations.
Well, I also think that if we reclaim the right of way, that there'll be more parking down there than there currently is.
I agree with you.
We just need, 60 feet is 3 car lengths, basically. It's 3 parking spaces. And you need at least that much to be able to turn around down there.
I agree.
Okay. Any other comments? We'll move on now. Thank you very much. We covered both those parking. Now we're up to Sands, Sag Hills, Azarest, Nineveh Historic District town level designation. And very pleased to be bringing this forward. This is an important area in our town and in our history, and it certainly deserves recognition from the town. So pleased to have this discussion. We have Jeremy Samuelson, our planning director, who's going to present. We also have some other distinguished guests with us as well.
Good afternoon, members of the board. Thank you for letting us share some information and updates about the Sands communities. I think, as you all know, likely from recent conversations, if not from before that, there are existing historic district designations for the 3 communities involved here, and those are Sag Harbor Hills, Azurest, and Nineveh. And through the creative alchemy of putting acronyms together, we come up with SANS. And so we have a national level designation that covers those 3 distinct neighborhoods, and we have a state level designation that covers those 3 neighborhoods or subdivisions for historic districts. The conversation that we're approaching you about today is to consider a town level designation that, sort of in an inverse of the way these things usually work. The town level designation actually carries carries a tremendous amount of weight with it, that, it actually covers aspects of designation and preservation that aren't necessarily incorporated into either the federal or the state level designation. So I think you all know a very little bit of the history, and we have a couple guests here who I'll introduce in a moment that I hope will share some of that information and history with you. But these are distinct historically, these are distinct architecturally, they're distinct culturally, and they speak in positive ways and in ways that we have to be open to hearing about now in retrospect, and sadly even in a contemporary context, for what this tells us about the history of our country and the history of race in our nation. So in terms of the specific conversation we're having today and where we can go from here, obviously this is wholly within the incorporated village of Sag Harbor, but it is also wholly within the township of East Hampton. So there is an opportunity here that is somewhat unique for us to not just have 3 levels of designation, but potentially to have 4 levels of designation. And I think the spirit with which this conversation is being brought forward is with the idea that anything that can shine light and preserve stories and bring voices forward that haven't been that haven't been heard as loudly as we all would like, needs to be an effort that we undertake as a municipality, even though this resides wholly within the incorporated village of Sag Harbor. So I would just highlight for you early in the conversation that there should be no conflict there. Both things are possible, and I think we have an opportunity, and I would even say an obligation, to pursue both. So without too much further ado, I'll just let you know that the process from here would actually be, if we chose to pursue this, would actually be that you all would need to have a public hearing, and there would be notice of that public hearing. But as you likely know with historic districts, there's also a need to formally nominate and then to notify the affected property owners and residents of the neighborhood. That would be via the town clerk's office. There's a whole process that's called for under town code here. We would have to make sure that we have as good addresses as possible for all of those individuals or entities. We would need to make a good faith effort to reach out to them and let them know that this is a consideration that the town is undertaking. And then that would need to be at a minimum, according to our code, 10 days before any public hearing. I think given the nature of this and the chaotic nature of people's lives right now, we would obviously want to make sure that we were giving people as much notice so that they could be aware, possibly attend in person or provide comments in writing, however they would want to share their feelings and reactions to this proposal. In addition, finally here, I think you all know that the Architectural Review Board under our code ultimately has purview to a certain extent over historic districts. This would be handled a little bit differently than the other historic districts in town should it move forward. The reason for that being because it is within the incorporated village of Sag Harbor. Nonetheless, I would suggest for your consideration that there is value in continuing to reach out to and lean on the expertise of our colleagues on the Architectural Review Board, given that this is an area of purview. And they've actually, at least 2 members of the ARB in particular, have reached out to me today, or this week rather, interested in this conversation and wanting to learn more and offer any guidance or expertise that you all may find useful as you navigate. So I have met for the first time today across the room with a wave our 2 guests who are here today. We have Dr. Georgette Greer-Key right here, who serves as the Executive Director and Curator of the Eastville Community Historical Society. And then I will make an assumption here that you may be Renee Simons. Am I correct about that? All right. So I will let these 2 community members, distinguished experts, share with you a little bit of the history that is so important for why, particularly post-World War II, beginning in about 1947, and in particular through the Civil Rights era, as we would sort of bookend that through the 1970s, why this was such a powerful retreat that not only was a place of respite for the residents who chose to create community there, excuse me, but why there was a ripple effect that went out regionally, but even nationally, that really made this sort of a powerhouse that has lasting effects for our community in very beneficial ways today. So with that, I will yield and ask Dr. Greer-Key to step forward and share some thoughts with us. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having us. As he said, my name is Georgette Greer-Key. I am the Executive Director of Eastville Community Historical Society in Sag Harbor. I also serve on the board of the Preservation League of New York State and the Museum Association of New York State. So when I think about the process that we've undertaken, it's been 29 years plus. Going back to the 1994 designation that we submitted to the village that ultimately was accepted, and the part of Eastville is in the Sag Harbor Historic District. In that nomination form, we did cite that these developments needed to be recognized. At that time, there was a few more years that they needed to be 50. With that being said, I think our charge as Eastville is really important because we focus on inclusion. We focus on all Americans, all places being readily available and in the built environment. A lot of the history for African Americans and the BIPOC community seems to be on paper and not always visual. So for that reason, the history is vast in itself. And I think that the nuances that we have uncovered through oral histories from age groups of 90 to 70 to 60 and even to the 30, the stories change of the significance and the importance, but just about every major milestone in history, we can align that with the Sands area. And it's important for us to think about the fact that this was a community that was in direct opposition to Jim Crow. If you think about the journey from, various city areas before the 495, these are the stories that we hear about in the invitation. And looking at the upward mobility track of African Americans in this country, it's a direct line that we can trace. Great migration from even slavery, 1830s, it goes back to many of the people that lived in the Eastville area provided respite for people during the building of the Sands area. And then we have some really important major players like people like Maud Terry and, Amazah Lee Meredith. They are the ones who devised this plan to offer a place of respite and a place where you could be safe, a place where you could swim. There's multiple documentaries that have been done. I have sent the links over to Jeremy, but on one particular that came out June 19th was, if you have Apple TV, the Home series, season 2, episode 5. It really highlights the community in all its nuances, from 5 to 7 generations of people who have been there summering. And to now, we see that there have been a lot of the elders that retired full time. So for us, looking at this designation was significant because you don't always realize that you have added to something important. And I think that was a part of our process, is speaking to just about every resident that we could and getting the oral histories. I talked to Jeremy about the museum in Washington and the fact that we have from our collections images of the Lippman and Johnson family summering on the beach. I mean, I always say this because it's true. Lippman Johnson, who built our house, which is a 1920 Sears and Roebuck catalog order house, standing on the beach looking like Rock Hudson, and the beautiful ladies. And then you see some of the older elders with them in 3-piece suits. So that tells a story in itself that we are in the National Museum, and the name of the exhibit is called Power to Place. And when I was there at the museum of the opening, because we were contributors, I went to the special opening with all the fancy people. And you sit next to this person, they say, well, this was in my basement, this was in my garage. So I say that to say, not all the times we think that what we're doing today is history making or important, but I always say that when you talk about preservation, we have to think about what that P means. It includes people, first of all, because it's our stories that make it significant. And then it's always place-based. And if we think about place-based, that's what's been missing. People can drive through and say, I never knew that this community was here. I never knew that this existed. And I love the historic markers, but how often do we drive by them and not really look at them? So I thank you for honoring my request. We're here to assist you. The town knows I worked on many projects with the town. I'm continuing to be available to you. And I just hope that this is able to move forward. We've worked on all levels, and this is going to be an honor for us to be listed this way. And now I'd like to bring up Renee, who is the president of SANS, and she's the one that kind of coined the word SANS. So this is our first conversation. We welcome any other conversation to go in depth with details, the survey, the process, whatever you need, we're here for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gerke.
Thank you, Georgette. Good afternoon. I'm Renee Simons, and I did coin it, but I did it because I'm a marketing person. I'm really a business person, not so much a preservationist, and I needed an easier way to refer to all of the associations and not leave one out. So, and I wrote my stuff down because I knew I might follow her, and I want to make sure I get everything in. So thank you for this opportunity to meet and discuss the issue with the town of East Hamptons, and also talk about preservation goals and processes. I'm the president of the Sands Sag Harbor Resident Group, which pursued the listing of the Sag Harbor Hills, Azores, Nineveh subdivisions or SANS, as we now refer to it. And we also were very successful in getting the New York State and National Registry of Historic Places. That was really a priority of ours, and we were able to achieve that. And that was really miraculous since, again, this is not our first language, but we were able to do that. Our efforts were recognized by New York State Historic Preservation Area for, quote, collaboration to document, designate, and advocate at the state and national levels. And I have my pages numbered, just to, I'm a freak. Since the SANS organization's inception in 2016, it has demonstrated a commitment to processing of and gaining appropriate recognition for the area based on the area's cultural significance. The importance of to preserve the area was spotlighted by the Preservation League of New York, citing the area as one of the state's 7 to save locales. In addition, the Preservation of Long Island organization found the rare history and locale as one of the Long Island's endangered historic places. As background, the Sands area is one of the last remaining and thriving American examples of post-World War II middle to upper class resort areas founded and planned by African Americans. People don't realize that communities really were founded and developed. You think of Levittown, that's a planned community. Well, the Sands area was also a planned community at about the same time. This history is woefully undocumented despite its historical importance and impact in America. Over the years since 1947, Jim Crow-like subtle gerrymandering left little alternatives for African Americans' recreational options across America. We were not allowed, even though they were public in nature. We weren't allowed to attend. There was no place to go. Similar to about 100 or so other comparable areas in the country, the Sands founding residents forged forward and created 3 unique communities out of virgin forest land within the town of East Hampton. While the village of Sag Harbor was failing following the war, and you probably aware after the war, all smaller areas in the island were really struggling economically. And as fate would have it, Sands' need for recreational and cultural as an enclave fit for us. Actually, it fit well into the Sag Harbor's circumstance and ultimately contributed to the economic growth and vitality of the village and town, as services and tax structures were supported by the new Sands residents. Okay, so where are we now? I'm coming to the end because I know it's been a long day and I haven't stood here for all of the time that you have. Our SANS organization goals were simple in 2016 and remain unchanged today. We wanted local, state, and national recognition as an historic district based on the area's documented cultural significance. Today, we hope the town of East Hampton will recognize the area for its historic importance in American history. It's not just one spot. It really is American history. And again, there used to be over 100, and now there may be a handful around the United States that still exist. You have one in your own backyard. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you very much, Renee.
Oh, before I forget, thank you. So when we did what we did, I think the state was so profoundly amazed that a bunch of citizens who were basically civilian at this were able to pull this off. We basically funded it ourselves. We pulled together, we hired the consultants that we needed, and we oversaw it with the oral history, et cetera, et cetera. And I understand that we received one of the highest marks as a submission. And so they honored us with an award. And we have a few original copies, and I'd like to present one to the village towards permanent records for your permanent archiving of this. And basically it says it's from the New York State Historic Preservation Award. It's award presented to the Sands and names of the subdivision in Long Island. And I already met, and it's that outstanding collaboration to document, designate, and advocate for Sag Harbor's New York State and national registries listed historically African-American summer community. And it's in the, as you know, when you become a listing entity, it goes into the Library of Congress. And so we're there now. So you're represented.
That's amazing.
So I'll move this.
Yeah.
Let me come down.
Yeah. Yeah. Go supervisor.
And I didn't frame it, I wasn't sure if we put things, so I just wanted to know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a plug about the Apple, I know you're recording, to the Apple TV thing. It's very impressive. I was even impressed, and I knew it was coming. They have things like Australia, some other countries, and then they'll have United States, Long Island. And Long Island is actually the Sands 34-minute video, which is outstanding. It's beautifully photographed. So I really strongly, you can get to Apple TV, look it up.
Season 2, episode 5.
Episode 5.
I wrote it down.
It is,
I'm gonna try and
and
check
it
it out.
captures something that we say is important in our cultural significance. It captures a sense of community. And that's what makes it so unique. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Renee. Dr. Greer, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jeremy, can I ask a question then, just of the process? I know you were talking about the process and survey. According to chapters 255, 725B, I don't see any reason why this wouldn't be designated, but we have to make sure this is historical districts. So next step is to get the district boundaries set to us that you're looking to go to the public hearing for. Every individual in your district will then have to be individually noticed on this, because there is, by doing historical designation, there is a potential benefit, but also a burden to them long-term. So you were saying that you've had the support of all of the, the majority of the members of the homeowners associations and such.
Well, we have.
How's the outreach have gone? That's all I'm asking.
Well, outreach has been, when we did the survey through the state actually sent out all of the notices similar to your municipality would do the same thing and provide opportunity for comment. How we have been perceived, it's just like anything else. What we are looking to do, we're simultaneously working with you right now to hopefully push this forward, and we are working with the village as well. So I think in terms of how this goes, we have all the addresses. I have connected our state SHPO office directly with the town, and also I think Jeremy has access to the boundaries that we have submitted, and also any addresses that you need. The state has them, they sent them out, and we can also work with the clerk and the village. But for how we move forward, the best way to gauge is the public hearing.
I agree with that.
And so I think when we have the public hearing, again, this is our first time talking with you, we can provide presentation, a PowerPoint, and a timeline of everything that we've done. Like I said, to me, as the Eastville director and steward of that organization, we stewarded the Sands community as a lead advisor to the Sands community. So we have a track record of working from 1993 to the current, and we have not left them. We're holding their hands. And so me as a preservationist, historian, and educator, it is my goal to make sure that that the voices are heard, but also that we look directly to rely on what the code says and how we operate under the code and the guidelines to move it forward. Again, because I think that when we think about what we are preserving for the future is the goal here, and it could disappear in a day or a night, and we have been under some pressures to do that. I also just want to point out the fact of education of preservation. To some people, it's a second language, and even if it's not, they still have their interpretation. I don't want to say I'm a traditionalist in regards to interpreting the code, but I do think that there was a learning curve and what can be done. And when you look at the code, these individual structures have to be looked at and judged on an individual basis and not a broad stroke. And so I think sometimes people get a little nervous when they hear a historic district because all of a sudden they think it's a big no to everything. And I'm here to tell you, working in all 5 towns, that that's not true. And I think that we need to continue to educate our general public on what this preservation really means for your community and what changes you can make. I did not say that I also sit on the Historic District Advisory Board for the town of Brookhaven. So I'm well-versed in code, and anything you need, like I said before, I'll be willing to be at your beck and call.
Georgette, do you already have guidelines for this?
Yes, we do.
Could we get, and can we use them as the town of East Hampton? They'll be at the ARB level for us as well? Okay.
Absolutely. We worked with David Barnes, who is an excellent, and you probably know him, he could be in your record. We worked specifically with David Barnes. And again, this was also self-funded to say, this is what we would like it to look like as far as a management plan. So we've done that. It hasn't been adopted on the village level yet because we're still working there, but I'll have no problem with forwarding that to you.
Thank you.
So we look forward to working with you and internal staff to work out all the details. And,
okay, Supervisor, you know how to get me.
Yes,
All these
and
questions that I heard
you know
today.
how to get me as
was,
well.
I was not trying to say things, but I was like, yeah, we work together.
Yes, we do. It's nice to see you. Oh, thank you.
Thank
Thank you so much.
So much.
Thank you, Renee.
Thank you.
Real pleasure.
And that concludes our work session topics. We have liaison reports now.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the new senior center. The survey that we were doing for the new senior center is closed, and we're really pleased.
When did it close? I mentioned that last night. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's
Okay,
closed.
sorry, Dave.
I know, well, I mentioned it
It was,
before, but I
yeah,
mentioned it again.
it was open for, it was originally scheduled for 2 weeks and we left it open a couple more days. You know, a few hundred people participated. We were extremely pleased with the results. One of the architects, Carol, pointed out that it was great that the town and the community are on the same page, because many times they'll go out and do community engagement and find out there's a disconnect between what the town thinks the community wants and what the community wants. And there is no disconnect. We're all on the same page there, which was great. The other thing we talked about, they wanted us to confirm that we wish the center to be a warming and cooling center in case of an emergency, which I would imagine the board.
That's been a role that it played currently and in the past.
So now we're working with the planning department with Jeremy and Eric and Diane Patrizio and myself, going through the schematic and, what kinds of rooms do we need, what kind of sizes. So we're working through that. We're going to be meeting every other week with the architects, and I'm hoping we'll have something to bring to the board, probably the last meeting in September at the work session. The next thing I wanted to bring up was the working group for the Route 114 project. We've been meeting every other week. And what we've talked about is we need to get agreements now with the the town and the East Hampton Housing Authority, and the town and the Sag Harbor Community Housing Trust. Because I'm going to have resolutions on for Thursday. We want to hire and to do an archaeological study and take a look there. We've got a proposal from Tracker in the amount of $4,300. We also need to get the Sag Harbor Community Trust properties surveyed. We had used Gary Benz for our 2 properties. They had used another surveyor. We need everything
On one map.
on one map. We need 2-foot contours. So I've got a resolution for that. And in the interim, until we have those agreements, which I'll work with the town attorney's office to do, we've got a letter from the trust granting permission for service providers retained by the town or for town employees to enter upon and examine the property. And so I think we're comfortable with that. So the next thing we're going to be working on, once the survey, it's going to take about 4 weeks once we approve that. And then the planning department can go back and kind of look at what the building envelope is for the project. And in the meantime, the working group is working on what would the RFP look like for the architect and builder and whatnot. So we're making great progress there. And then last night, the East Hampton Sag Harbor CAC met in person here. And boy, do they like to talk about traffic and infrastructure. So I know we talked to David last month about moving forward with the traffic circle, the engineering for the traffic circle at Stephen Hand's Path, Long Lane, and 2 Holes of Water, and that we would use funding from highway surplus. They're wholeheartedly in support of that. Hopefully we can do that on Thursday. I had also talked about, we had gotten a proposal from McLean for about $32,000 for them to study the triangle of, Stephen Hand's Path, Cedar Street, and Old Northwest. We're going to hold off on that. Steve Lynch is making traffic improvements up there. And now that turn that you make from Stephen Hand's Path, I guess, I don't know if it's like Cedar Street, Stephen Hand's Path.
Stephen Hand's Path.
Yeah, he's arranged it now, so it's a 90-degree turn, and the visibility is terrific. And everybody last night was at the CAC was excited by that. Apparently, he's got a couple of other things he's looking to do, so we want to hold off and wait because he may have figured out how to fix the problem there. So when we were, I spoke to Steve this morning. I wanted to call him up because everybody was really grateful for the work that he's doing. It was also mentioned that the traffic light at Route 114 in Stephen Hand's Path was replaced, and that there was a concern that the timing is off. Now I know that is, New York State, but didn't seem to have the same timing as the old traffic light. So I'm going to look into that. And then the intersection of Town Lane and Spring Close Highway, just by Jenny's Path. Apparently there's police officers there quite frequently, and it's a major intersection now. And just like we all know, everybody's looking for back roads and cut throughs and things. And it was suggested that become a 4-way stop. I spoke to Steve this morning about it, and I want to reach out to Chief Sarlo to see if he can pull if there's accident reports for that intersection.
It's Oxbonic and
no, it's Town Lane, Spring Close Highway.
I think the line of sight is really bad there, isn't it? If you're
because the roads with Jenny's Path, they don't line up.
Yeah.
And and then what's the stop sign on Jenny's Path, on Spring Close Highway is, set back 20 or 30 feet. Yeah. And people, it's there, and the white line is starting to, rub off. So apparently people don't necessarily always stop there and wind up in the front lawn of the home across the street. So I want to talk to the chief and see if this is something we need to pursue or how we can make it safer up there. The other thing they talked about was invasive species like bamboo and tree of heaven, and they made a recommendation that the town do a public education campaign on that. The county's reconstruction of County Road 40, 3 Mile Harbor came up, and Kate had gotten information from Bridget Fleming's office that's scheduled. for 2026, 2027 construction. So that's a little bit of a ways off. There had been an accident at the intersection of Springs Fireplace Road and Floyd Street. And unfortunately, Waves and other apps are telling folks they don't realize that Floyd Street is part of it is one way. And there was a collision there and it hit a telephone pole. They've put a new pole in, but the second pole hasn't been replaced yet. I've got to confirm that all the lines are off because it's pretty precarious the way it's there. So
That's going to be done by Verizon, and that's
Yeah,
a double
that's what-
double.
that's what-
You can notice Verizon to do that. They'll have, I think, 30 days to remove it. If not,
Okay.
they're fine.
And then we also discussed the senior center, the airport, about folks not pulling over for ambulances and the community housing fund referendum. So we covered a lot of bases last night in the meeting. And that's what I've got for today.
Thanks, Kathy. Dave, do you have a report?
Sure. So last night we had the Montauk CAC, which I did mention the survey, so I apologize to them, but I mentioned it last month also as we sent it out. Anyway, we had Montauk CAC last night. We did it via Zoom. The beach subcommittee had a discussion and they said it's a moderately good year and the committee is satisfied. And then we went on to the airport subcommittee. Airport subcommittee just wanted an update about where we are in a type of litigation. Moving forward on there, we had a great presentation by Sam Klein and also Laura Tuman about the town's CARP program and presentation as we move forward to the public hearing that is on Thursday at 2 p.m. here at Town Hall. They did make a motion, a recommendation of support of the adoption of the CARP plan. It was 14 yes, 3 no's, 2 recusals, and 6 extensions. So it was overwhelmingly approved by the support. Next there was a long discussion about litter and right-of-way in Montauk. I've discussed all the actions that the town's taken about litter, but there seems to be a disconnect right now between the town's control and maintenance of our planter boxes, right away, civic organizations and such, in which where I'm having our Builders and Grounds to meet with some of the civic organizations and the Chamber of Commerce out there right now, because the control of the weeds in the areas right now are sort of out of control. And they are. And
Montauk Village Association.
That's one of the organizations that was discussing it. To their point, they said no. So I think that level of disconnect, we're having a meeting there to figure that out and see how we can come up with something that is more for community beautification and attractive, and that we can do this on an annual basis. So I've been there 2 years now. We have this discussion every year. So it's something that I would look into, but there was concern. There was a great concern, and they put a resolution forward that was passed unanimously for the town to take on long-term annual maintenance of the common areas and flower beds. So that was what we discussed at the Montauk CAC last night, and I want to again thank Laura and Kim for the presentation of the CARP plan there. Moving forward on here, town lifeguards right now, they have the Nipper Guard Tournament is at Aubers on Atlantic Avenue, and that'll be Wednesday, tomorrow, and Thursday. And then we have the Junior Lifeguard tournament this upcoming weekend, Saturday and Sunday, 6th and 7th at Atlantic Avenue. Then they go off to the National Championships, as we've discussed, on August 10th and August 13th. I bring this up because town lifeguards that were stationed at Atlantic Avenue, Indian Wells, along with responding lifeguards at ABA, actually saved a man's life this past week. Not from swimming, but from actually some type of cardiac issue from falling out from bicycling on the beach. But great coordination through all these efforts of our town lifeguards, other lifeguards in the area, and then our town lifeguarding programs really has showed up to be a lot of heroes this summer. So I want to make sure that they're recognized there. I want to let everyone know that we're having a delay in the delivery of the Westlake Comfort Station. The reason for the delay is for energy efficiency and state permitting right now. The decision has been made to modify modify the actual bathroom, but that puts it out about 4 months from when it was supposed to get delivered. We're probably going to look at delivery in March to April of next year, 2023. But I did not want it to retrofit it. I wanted to come complete, so we didn't want to go through any warranty issues. And I let the CAC know that. I'm now letting the board. We discussed a lot of littering. Littering in chapter 167-4 in the front of businesses. It says actually quasi-public places in which businesses are in the code mandated to actually clean and pick up in front of their locations on the sidewalks. I know we've been enforcing that in Montauk, and we'll do that in other locations, but I want to make sure our businesses are aware of that as we get into our dog days of summer here. Today is the last day, close of business day today to accept water quality grants for our water quality funding. The RFA will close by the end of today. With that being said, I wanted to actually then also talk about the Water Quality Technical Advisory Committee, which had a meeting last week. We were discussing the guidance documents for the water quality. For the Water Quality Technical Advisory Committee, which was formed part of a townwide referendum to put funding into it. And more importantly, I want to personally thank, and for the board also to thank the chairman of that committee, Christopher Clapp, who has chaired that committee. He's stepping down as the chair of that committee. He chaired the committee since its inception. Wow. And that doesn't happen often here. And particularly when it's a committee in which is in charge of a very large funding source right now to actually come up with very transparent means of review, vetting, and that authorization of funding. And for good reason, he did a great job. And I want to thank Chris Clapp. I know the board is supportive of him, but I want to say it publicly. Maybe someone will pick it up in the press. Chris has now
front row.
Chris Clapp has now moved on to chair the Ocean Sewage Alliance. So he is now continue the work on ways to continue to improve our environment of not just our little area of East Hampton and the East End of Long Island, but also the world and too. So myself personally and others, we thank Chris Clapp for his leadership that he has shown over the years to the Water Quality Technical Advisory Committee. Two last things as I'm getting hungry.
Make it fast.
Yeah, make it fast. The skate park is being finalized out of Montauk. We will actually, I had a meeting there yesterday with the head of state parks out here, Tom Dess, to go over these final couple of weeks. We'll be looking to open it up in the next, probably within the end of this month. We've been talking about, and I know the board has supported a change of supervision out there and some rules, which I will make sure that the skating and general public know. So that's a great thing. They're doing their last pouring of concrete. And we also met to discuss some of our town upcoming new pickleball courts that we're looking to install in Montauk. So that's all I have. And
I'm just trying to decide whether it's going to be skateboard or inline skates for the ribbon cutting.
Oh, really? Kudos. Good luck to you, man. You know?
Right. Knee pads.
Yeah. Helmet for sure.
Those are still in the rules. Those rules that aren't changing.
That's right. Part of the rules. Thank you, David. Sylvia?
Since our last meeting, the business committee met on July 20th. So as always, we had Robert Ross from Southampton Hospital on, and he gave us the COVID numbers for the various hospitals. So as of July 20th, there were 5 patients at Southampton. There have been in the last week between 3 and 10 patients at Southampton. Stony Brook had 56 patients. That's actually up from 48 that we had 2 weeks ago. And Eastern Long Island has 4 patients. So we are seeing some activity, unfortunately. Southampton Hospital Parish Hall is still doing testing every day but Thursday. Please call to confirm times or go on their website. The positivity rates per day during the week of July 20th range from one day at 6.7 to the highest at 19.5% positivity for testing. So it's still out there, and please be careful. Business committee is very concerned about the ability of the 0.5% transfer tax for seasonal housing and how that's going to work. They'd like to work with Fred Thiel to confirm that seasonal employee housing is possible. And if not, then if there is a way to amend the law in the near future. Additionally, they would like to have one member of the committee that will be formed after the referendum passes, that it should include a person from the hospitality arena area.
It's already in it, right?
No, I think just
I think it's real estate. There's some that are pointed out, but nothing in hospitality.
But I support that. That makes sense.
So
yesterday on TV.
we discussed the grant opportunity through CARP, which is Coastal Assessment Resiliency Plan. Jeremy Samuelson, who's here, will be working with Paul Monty and the chamber. They had the most questions, and he's already done that. So he's been there and been working with them, answering questions and helping them understand what that grant is going to do. Associated with this, just to inform the businesses, new lighting legislation that we heard several weeks ago has now been, which allows string lighting that is fully shielded and otherwise code compliant, has been filed with the state. So administrative permits from the planning department are required for this. So we hope to see our businesses
I'm starting to see some of those too.
yeah, I've seen them up at La Fondita and there are other areas. So thank you guys for already, businesses for jumping on that. The Wainscott Green, working with Tom House and Carolyn Logan Gluck, would like to set survey pins at the corners of the original swamp building as part of marking the history of that property. David Saskis is going to be doing the surveying work, and the pins will be low profile and will not interfere with any walking or mowing on the property. I had a picture of what it looks like. It is just a round bronze, a disc that is below the level, just sits right on.
Benchmark. It's like a survey benchmark.
Yes, and so those will be the pins. And so in order for them to move forward, we need the board to, I don't know if we need a resolution for that.
I think we do.
We
I
should
think
probably do that.
Okay.
We should do that and memorialize.
Yeah.
Okay, so who would write that resolution?
I can do it.
What's that?
I'll have staff do it.
You can, okay,
I support that.
I
Yeah.
just needed the background information.
okay, I'll be happy to.
As long as it's low profile and mowing, it doesn't affect maintenance on it or a trip hazard.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's all I have.
And I would cover off Cynthia Del Mastro too. I would let her know that it's something that.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay,
Ready for me?
we are.
Okay, the spring CAC met and subcommittee reported on their meeting with Fred Thiel. They are bringing up the conversation about school district consolidation. Very heavy lift, very long lift. People have worked on it for a long time, but they are committed to going out to the other school districts and talking to folks and to see if anything can happen there. Major issues in Springs that people are concerned about is speeding along all the roads. That continues to be a problem. To that, I want to thank Steve Lynch. Is it Steve or Parks that put the 15-mile-an-hour suggested signs that folks have been asking for in Maidstone Park around the loop and going up Maidstone Park Road. Folks were really happy to see how responsive and how quickly those went up. That's another area where they're speeding. As Kathy said, information from Bridget Fleming's office let us know that the upgrade to 3 Mile Harbor, the road project, will be delayed 2026 to 2027. Again, supply chain issues and absolutely no staff on the county level. And therefore, the CAC would like to propose a Springs-wide bike lane study in the meantime to see what roads would be appropriate continuing with bike lanes, because there continues to be the conflict between bike riders and people driving, particularly with the speeding. Forward to that, and something that I hear has been being brought up across the town, is a discussion and concern about the number of structures, irrigations, planting, fences, driveways, etc., blocking the road right-of-ways in Springs. From what I'm hearing across the board, this seems to be a growing concern. And again, that is about public safety, as Chief Sarlo explained to me. One of the reasons we have the road right-of-ways and why they should be clear is that they are a place for cars to be able to swerve if need be, and with obstructions there, they have no place to go.
So I think there's an issue though in urban renewal that I'm not sure that we have, our code covers that. And I had asked the town attorney's office to look into that, and that was months ago. And I know that John had to reach out to the Association of Towns to see if, if we could enact, town code for urban renewal areas with
road right away.
Yeah, I typically thought we weren't. Yeah.
We're still awaiting that opinion back.
Yeah, we need to turn up the heat on that if we can with them, because it's dangerous. The spikes, the rocks. I mean,
it's becoming more and more of an issue. As
and then once it snows, you don't even know what's there.
Yeah, I mean, fences and gates, everything, structures, are moving their way in. So I'm glad to see that we're researching an opinion on that. The Energy Sustainability Committee met and discussed an in-depth outreach to our community on what all electric means for new construction and how it actually saves folks money. The committee is committed to developing an educational outreach for the community and to the trades, and request the opinions of other town departments as well. They also will be holding a or I guess it's a little bit later, the mid-year organizational meeting to discuss and vote on priorities for the upcoming year. And I and a few of the members and Natural Resources met with the consultants who are tasked with creating the net energy roadmap for the town to create a practical and just transition next steps to our 100% renewable energy pledge. That work is ongoing to update the infamous and first climate action plan in the state for our town back in 2013. The Waterfront Advisory Committee, our grant application for the consolidated funding grant for the Montauk Business Area Revitalization Project was submitted. We found out about it 2 weeks ago. And so I want to thank everyone who worked on to get this grant application in such short notice. Lisa LaCory, Jeremy Samuelson, Brian Frank, Kim, Sam, and Becky Hansen. Everyone helped us gather the information. We received very many letters of support from all sectors across the town and in Montauk, from the businesses in Montauk, environmental groups. The chamber ultimately put in a letter of support with projects that they would like to see included if we're able to go forward. And also, I want to thank David Lees, who gave a time commitment, should we get the grant, to a steering committee for the grant. And that made everyone in Montauk feel great that you would do that. And I want to thank you for that.
Maybe I get a free beer.
Our newly formed litter committee, and they would like to be called the Litter Action Committee because they would like to take action on litter. We had our first organizational meeting. I thank the community members who volunteered. We have folks representing each CAC from across the town. Education and outreach is their goal. A lot of the members who have volunteered for this group come from GAG, Group Against Garbage, and they have great ideas for outreach, and we'll be discussing more of that in the future. Suffolk Wind, they began some of their direct outreach to property owners on Beach Lane in preparation for the work in the fall. That will continue when that initiates, and that when that happens, begins in the fall, that'll be the final phase of onshore construction before restoration begins onshore next spring. And again, I just would like to thank everyone for all their hard work on the grant application, and remind everyone that the hearing for the Coastal Assessment and Resiliency Plan is this coming Thursday, beginning at 2 p.m. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Kate. I just want to reiterate that Suffolk County Water Authority has declared a stage 1 water emergency due to the prolonged heat and dry weather. Suffolk County Water Authority is declaring a stage 1 water emergency in the town of East Hampton to ensure that there's sufficient water for firefighting and other emergency purposes. Residents must stop all irrigation between the hours of 12 a.m. and 7 a.m. So get your irrigation reprogrammed to work outside those hours. Refrain from all non-essential water usage, and reduce shower times and embrace other water saving measures. The East End Supervisors and Mayors Association met in Greenport on July 27th. And on the agenda, we had a discussion from Louise Harrison, Save the Sound, Plum Island update. This is an effort to preserve Plum Island. As you may know, the Animal Research Center there will be closing, and the U.S. government was surplusing the island at one point. There is, while that immediate transfer to the highest bidder, I guess private entities, has been avoided, the government is still looking to transfer the property to some other federal agency, and it's kind of like whoever raises their hand first gets it. And whether or not they would operate and use the island the way that the area communities would prefer is unknown. So there's an effort, and the Supervisors Mayors Association sent a letter in support of declaring Plum Island a national monument. And that letter went directly to President Biden, urging him to make that designation for various reasons: cultural, historic, environmental. There are hundreds of bird species. 1/4 of all the North American bird species use Plum Island at some point during the year, which is pretty astounding. There are also some other very unique environmental aspects to the island, as well as it's a place that the local indigenous peoples also inhabited. So there are other cultural resources on the island. So we, as an association, have signed on to a letter. There was a request that individual townships, if they support the idea, to send their own letter. So I would ask that the board support a letter from the town of East Hampton.
Yep.
I will circulate a draft to you shortly for your comments, any suggestions or changes. We also had a presentation from Lynn Arthur, Peak Power, Long Island, Coalition for Community Distributed Energy, CDG. The PSC, Public Service Commission, is having an August 11th meeting to discuss changes to the structure there. Lynn Arthur was there along with Frank Falcone, Southampton Deputy Supervisor, who discussed the advantages to CDG for local communities. And I'm sure the board all knows we have various areas that we've looked at for community generation. This is something that will allow us to put in, it's primarily solar, but to have the ability to specifically target certain areas or neighborhoods or individuals based on class. You could designate seniors or whatever who could participate in that distributed energy program and take advantage of those who may not be able to put on rooftop solar because they live in wooded areas. You could designate it however you like. So there was discussion about that. In terms of, so we had the Town Property Management Committee met. We discussed a request for a management plan for the Edwards House, which is on the Duck Creek property. That is a colonial era home of Edwards's. And at that time, they farmed pretty much from Gann Road, almost the entire east side of the harbor. That farm was quite extensive. It's beautifully maintained exterior of the house. There's never been a full restoration on the inside. That's something that the town board could look into.
Yeah, we actually have an engineering estimate for engineering on that I can present very shortly too.
Thanks, David. There was discussion about Fisher House, which the management plan we discussed today. Part of the discussion really centered around American with Disabilities Act, ADA accessible bathrooms on the property and how best pursue that. there is a more recent addition onto the historic house that was made by the Aiken family, which is large enough to accommodate an ADA bathroom. And the general feeling of those on the committee was it made more sense to pursue either an interior bathroom in the non-historic addition or to have a separate ADA bathroom outside the historic structure. They felt that the existing historic bathrooms were so unique and important to the overall structure that we should avoid converting them. And that was also
Glenn Hall in the meeting?
Glenn Hall was in the meeting. He's the chair of the Disabilities Committee.
Right.
And he actually was the first to speak up, saying that it made more sense to have that approach given the historic nature of those bathrooms. We had a discussion about the Boys and Girls Harbor Pavilion. The committee, as you know, has recommended a 30 by 40 pavilion, the siding of which they'd like to get comments from the planning department staff as to how the structure is actually sited, keeping in mind that there may be potential for putting solar on the roof at some point in the future. So they just wanted to get comments from planning department professionals about that. Let's see. There was a discussion as well of the Brooks Park property by the committee members, the costs and options. I think there was concern expressed by some of the committee members about where the money might come from and whether or not the organization that is forming around it would have the financial wherewithal to come up with some of the spending gaps that could occur between CPF and non-CPF. And let's see, also want to just mention the most recent COVID-19 test results from our testing location. The numbers for the week of 7/25 through 7/31, there are 57 tests given, 13 positives, a rate of nearly 23%. So there's quite a prevalence. I think people taking advantage of the testing center are those who are feeling sick and are symptomatic. But we know that even those numbers are not a large enough sample size to really give us an idea. But we do offer free home test kits, which are here at the atrium and town hall. We ask you to limit yourself to 2 per customer, if you will. But I think that also is maybe skewing the numbers and doesn't give us a clear picture because a lot of people are testing at home and may not report that they've tested positive. So
it could be higher?
It could be a higher infection rate. It definitely could be higher. So it's hard to know. It could be lower too, in the general population.
Right.
Let's see. I think that's it for me right now on that. So we have a couple of resolutions. David, I think you have the first.
I do, sir. I have resolution 2022-953. This is a budget modification for the highway department, bringing $2,500 from subcontractor costs to $1,500 to subcontractor costs in a different line, and also $1,000 in the amount for safety supplies.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried.
954 is appoint volunteer to the Shellfish Hatchery, Owen LaPerriere, retroactive to July 28th, 2022.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried.
And I have a resolution 2022-955. This is for a license agreement for Elecnor Hawkeye LLC at East Hampton Airport. And this is for the Hawkeye LLC, which is a contractor for South Fork Wind to utilize a portion of the town airport for the storage of equipment and materials on a temporary basis. And the airport manager recommended an already cleared and disturbed location adjacent to the area used by PSEG to stage equipment and materials in the event of a storm or other emergency. The town board reviewed the request and the recommendation of the airport manager and agrees to the recommended area and has agreed to provide a temporary license to Hawkeye to utilize the area. The proposed license is an unlisted action under the State Environmental Quality Review Act, and an environmental assessment has been prepared for the town board with regard to the proposed license. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the town board hereby adopts a negative declaration pursuant to SECRA with regard to the proposed license, and that such license shall commence on August 1st, so it's retroactive to August 1st, 2022, and continue until December 31st, 2022, with an option to extend for an additional 6-month period upon the same terms. And further resolve that Elecnor Hawkeye LLC shall pay the sum of $1 per square foot per month for a total sum of $4,164 per month until the license expires and all materials and equipment are removed from the site, and the town board authorizes the supervisor to execute a license agreement with Elecnor Hawkeye, subject to the approval of the town attorney for the purposes outlined herein.
It was 4166, though.
What did I say?
64. You said 64.
See, that's the thing. Okay, so I tried to get a little more, but it's $44,166 per month. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That's carried.
Thank you.
Resolution 956 is appoint part-time police officer to the East Hampton Town Police Department, John Picano, and that is an hourly rate of $26.50, effective retroactive to August 1st.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried. Resolution 2022-957. It's payment of legal fees to Regano 2020, where it's been determined that there's $12,625 in legal fees due to Regano LLC, the work performed in 2020 invoice, and in the amount of $2,575 in one invoice, $2,250 in another, and $7,800 in the third. And this is relating to the wind farm project.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried. Resolution 958 is to amend Resolution 2022-944. Whereas the Town Board of East Hampton on July 21st, 2022 adopted Resolution 2022-944. Whereas Resolution 944 used the incorrect resolution number for one of the adopted local laws that are subject to mandatory referendum, referring to Resolution number 27825 in error. Now be it resolved that Resolution 2022-944 is hereby amended to change the incorrect reference, omitting the reference of Resolution 27825 and substitute the correct resolution number 28077 in its place.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried. Other matters to bring before the board?
Are you done?
Or resolutions?
I make a motion that we go into exec session for advice of counsel, personnel, and CPF.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried. Shall we reconvene at 3:30? Is that enough time for folks?
That is.
Barely.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Make it 3:45?
Thank you, Matt.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys. Have a wonderful day.